Good afternoon and good evening, good morning to all the digital health folks around the world who are interested in understanding the latest and the most relevant evidence in the adoption of digital health. My name is Stan Kichnowski. I chair Hitlab, and I'm also the director of the digital health program at Columbia University. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the March Hitlab Symposium, revisiting the basics of digital health, which has been undergoing an unbelievable amount of transformation over the last 3 years. And now with the newest models in AI and various types of generative text to machine learning, we're seeing the relevance and the importance of digital health evolve even further and faster than what we've seen over the last 3 years. Now with the new models around chat and around these types of generative language databases coming to play. So very, very glad to have you all here today. And as we're seeing people filter into the actual virtual auditorium, if you will, we have to pay special thanks to our sponsors with which this would not be happening today. First, the Merck Global Innovation Fund. Of course, the nation's largest and one of the world's largest digital health funds. Goodwin Legal Services. Goodwin is one of the top digital health law firms in the world, and we're really grateful for their partnerships and collaboration. And of course, FFF Enterprises, one of the country's largest distributors of medical supplies and medical goods, and one of the most innovative groups around the country today when it comes to new products and new digital health technologies to help hospitals and manufacturers, and certainly a variety of pharmacies as well. And of course, our great partners at H-Tech Collaborative from AARP, they're just tremendous to work with. And thank you to them as well for their sponsorship. Today's agenda is packed. We are going to kick off the program with looking at wearables with the Breakthrough Alliance chair and the president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, Bill Taranto, talking with the lead for Garmin Health, Andy Beckman, and talking about what wearables are doing to change the world. And then we're going to dive into the recent chief strategy officer, now investor in digital health companies, Laurent van Lerberg, and he's going to be talking about what's going on within the digital health ecosystem, not just in the US, but around Europe and the world. And of course, one of our favorites, the founder and CEO of Rubatection, Sana Gaspard, is going to be coming on 11:30 to talk about what she's seeing from her company and her inventions and certainly her innovation around geriatric bed sores and things of that sort. What she's seeing around how digital health has moved beyond the pandemic and is now solving bigger and better geriatric problems. And then at 11:45, we'll have the hot New York City startup, the Recovery Plus CEO and founder, Peter Nemi, talking with Jenny Martin, Chief Nursing Officer from Recovery Plus, as well as Tim Bilbrey, who is also with Recovery Plus, talking to us about the clinical analysis of what's going on with in-home rehab and how that's really paving the way, taking advantage of a lot of these new value-based care models and a lot of these new reimbursement models for remote telecare. And of course, top of mind on all these conversations will be how the AI and this kind of new chat, the new bots, whether it's BERT or whether it's ChatGPT or whatever it might be, are already making their way into healthcare and what that means for healthcare. To lead us off there will be a tremendous conversation from the Breakthrough Alliance chair, Bill Taranto, and a digital health veteran himself, along with Andy Beckman from Garmin Health. Bill, handing the virtual podium over to you.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it very much. And Andy, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm really excited today because I want to learn about Garmin Health, which I don't know a lot about. So I think the audience is going to be pretty excited about this little interview we have today. So welcome. The way we always like to start this, Andy, is, many of the audience may not know you, even like myself. And can you just tell the audience about your journey? How'd you start your career and how'd you end up, being sort of senior manager of Garmin Health at this time?
Hey, Bill, thanks a bunch for having me today and looking forward to our conversation. Excited to be here and learn more from the team. So exactly why I'm here, just to kind of explain a little bit more about Garmin Health. Most people may know Garmin as depending on what you're interested in, but Garmin has been, we like to think that we fuel people's passion. So if you have a hobby, we probably have a product that will make you better or help you enjoy your hobby a little bit better. So, but a little known part of Garmin is our Garmin Health business, and really it focuses on wearables and using wearables for digital health applications. So a little bit about me: I've been with Garmin for almost 15 years. It'll be 15 at the end of April here, mainly in a sales role, and I did some national account sales, and then I led our fitness segment for the Americas for a few years, and then moved into a strategy role, and then last June moved into our Garmin Health leadership role here, leading our sales for Americas as well. So North America, South America sales, and really it's a B2B sales role. So working with different applications, from remote patient monitoring to health and life insurance applications, corporate wellness, gyms, things like that.
Great. Well, wonderful journey. So let's talk healthcare now. So
Yeah.
I really like the remote monitoring space. We've invested in there, and I want to talk about wearables and just everything you're doing in wearables, and kind of why is that important to digital health?
Yeah, wearable devices, as you know, Bill, can be anywhere from smartwatches to smart bands to digital clothing to different trackers and whatnot. Really, the devices allow you to do many different things, from just tracking your overall steps, which can be a sign of activity, to many people are offering now, biosensing, basically, if you will, looking at heart rate and B2B interval, and that can be derived some heart rate variability, which can also open up many different things. And then we can also track pulse ox, we can track respiration, and many people can then take that for many different things, from tracking sickness or disease, diabetes, pre-diabetes, chronic conditions, things like that. But really, the wearables allow a brand new gateway, I guess, for not only the end user to be able to make their own kind of changes, if you will, from just different personal lifestyles, from tracking their stress and sleep, and just having basically a scoreboard, if you will, to know how am I doing, and what kind of changes do I need to make. But then also researchers and remote patient monitoring companies can, with wearables, can now, you don't need to go in and see everybody daily to be able to report that scoreboard to them, and then they can help to prescribe and look at things differently from a long ways away, and having that ability to just much more convenient for everybody involved.
Yeah, so I kind of, if I could offer a follow-up question in the same sort of realm of how people were. So you have your own set of wearables that you've all developed through Garmin Health, and then can customers come and then work with you through those wearables to maybe it's a cardiology office to work with those, their own patients, or can people come to you as well and maybe design a wearable that might be, more, closer to what they might be doing that you haven't produced yet?
Yeah, in general, most of it is just products that we've already developed, and then we use our APIs and SDKs with different partners and their platforms to help them to accomplish their goals that they have. Now, we have co-developed some things in the past, but it's probably not very common for us to do that. So.
Okay. Then can patients, like someone like myself, just order something on Garmin and self-monitor, or are these all done through working, say, with my physician or my, the payer provider network?
Yeah, no, everything can be individually based, and then but we do work with different clinical research places, universities, hospitals, things like that also develop their own little pilot run studies, and then they can sometimes provide the wearable for that. But yeah, Bill, we'd love to get a Garmin on your wrist and allow you to track your stress and sleep and heart rate and pulse ox and everything else throughout the day.
So now you mentioned a lot of therapeutic areas that you're in. What are some of the positive impacts that you're seeing with wearables, and maybe if you can get into some of the little clinical efficacy that you're seeing, or just what's the big impact that you're seeing that it's having?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, just with the key term remote, right? So now, you could be, hanging out on the East Coast of the United States, and you could be pulling in data from anybody that has agreed to share their data with you to for either from a research standpoint, or if we have some healthcare professionals here, if they have, it really opens up the ability to track and make decisions from anywhere in the world. So really, location is no longer a concern. You can have that communication. I think COVID obviously was rough on all of us, but it also opened up, I think, our minds to a little bit more of remote learning, remote training, remote communication from around the globe. So a few ways that people are using Garmin wearables. We actually partnered up with the Defense Innovation Unit during COVID. And basically, this is a division of the Air Force. And what they were able to do is they use Garmin wearables, and they actually developed an algorithm with Philips. But by using Garmin wearables, they were able to basically predict if someone was going to, have COVID-like symptoms roughly 2 days in advance. So what they were able to do is they'd be able to pull a squadron kind of apart, if you will. If they saw some people in their group was going to becoming sick, they could actually pull them off and kind of quarantine them before infecting the whole group. I know over in Germany too, there's also some different studies where they're using Garmin wearables to track Parkinson's medication. So, now the doctor doesn't have to see the Parkinson's patient every day, but now they can dial in that medication a little bit better from a remote standpoint using the accelerometers in the Garmin wearables.
Okay. I'll just add, I saw a couple questions pop in on the chat room, and it's more around sort of your cardiology sort of monitoring that you do. How accurate is your devices maybe versus an EKG? And then what else do you sort of track beyond heart rate?
Yeah, good question. So EKG, I mean, everything is coming from the wrist, or, we do have heart rate straps that we could do too that they're not FDA approved, but everything that we've been told is they're very accurate in comparison. We've also just had a software as a medical device, FDA approval for our ECG on our Venue 2 Plus recently. So that's kind of a big news for us. Similar to what you've seen with other wearables out there for AFib detection. As far as different accuracy enough, there's lots of people doing studies out there too in regards to using just general off-the-shelf wearables versus some maybe medically approved devices, and have been having good success from that perspective. And so in general, we feel like it's much more affordable for researchers to use Garmin wearables, as well as they really appreciate how easy it is to connect with our APIs and SDKs. And then the other thing that people probably don't realize is just how much longer our battery life is than other wearables out there too. So that allows us to, the patient can actually wear it for a long time, and then that, they don't, fall out of that bad habit of taking it off to recharge it and then forgetting it to put back on. So some of the other metrics that we're tracking too is B2B interval, which then can be derived for some heart rate variability. We track stress. We have a metric called body battery, which basically is a combination of sleep and stress and activity, and it basically gives everybody a gauge of how much energy do they have to take on their day. Kind of a realization that, oh wow, my body battery is low, and I probably need to recharge a little bit. But we track respiration and pulse ox, sleep quality, advanced sleep metrics as well. So.
Well, great, Andy. Well, thank you so much. Our 15 minutes always goes fast when we do these things, but I see Stan back on the screen. So I want to thank you, Andy, for joining me today. And just also one quick pitch that I always like to do before I turn it over to Stan as chairman of the Breakthrough Alliance. I always ask everybody, it's a great network of people, investors, students, entrepreneurs. Please join the Breakthrough Alliance, and be part of Hitlab. It's a wonderful organization. So Stan, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, and thank you both. Thank you, certainly Andy, for joining us, and thank you, Bill, for a terrific interview. And Bill, before we let you go, we know you're just back from Vive. Any Any comments, any highlights from Vive in Nashville that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, it was a great conference. I tell you, a lot more people were there than I didn't know what to expect. They had probably 4,000 or 5,000 people there. Great topics. I was very fortunate to do a keynote on it was geared towards CEOs of portfolio companies as well as investors of how to invest in these troubled waters that we're facing in 2023, and some tips of what you can do. Great set of companies that were displaying this conference is more focused on payer providers. So it was a lot of companies that were there to support those type of entities. But it's a great conference. I recommend people go to that. And then of course the sister conference is Health, which is a little more digital and technology related, coming in the fall. But I give them a lot. It was a really, really good conference. I was pretty impressed.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, again, thank you both for joining us today. And Bill, thank you for the kind words about Breakthrough and for the highlights of Vive.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Stan.
Thank you.
And again, I think, as Bill mentioned about the Breakthrough Alliance, it's a consortium of payers, providers, government agencies, manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, and tech companies like Google that are involved in trying to not only use the evidence base that's generated from Hitlab, but also share insights on where to invest, what's working, what's not working. And it's a mix of research, of private events, of cocktail hours, of different types of salons, things like that. So it's a tremendous organization, and it's in conjunction with New York City EDC, which is a phenomenal group, really trying to build life sciences all around the New York City area. So again, please do take a look at that and contact me. I'm going to throw my LinkedIn link into the chat box. Link in with me there if you have any questions or comments that you want added to the program here today. And of course, if you're interested in either BT1 or certainly the Breakthrough Alliance programs. And on that note, certainly one of the leaders in the digital healthcare system is Laurent, our next guest, who is from France and recently was leading the strategy efforts at Sanofi. And really happy to have him on the program here today. Laurent, welcome aboard. And first of all, tell us where you are, and then give us a little bit about your journey and your background.
Yes, hello, Stan. Thanks a lot for having me again today. So giving a bit of my background, 25 years in healthcare, as you can see there, BCG, Abbott, and Sanofi. Two things relevant to the session. First is I've been traveling quite a lot around the world, living actually in Asia, living in the US, in Europe, of course, but also had the chance to spend quite a lot of time in Africa, where we'll talk about it, that there is a lot also of digital innovation. Lastly, last 3 years, I've been Chief Strategy Officer in Sanofi, leading actually transformation of the pipeline, but also working a lot on digital. And that's probably what led me to decide to move to the digital health space, become an investor since the beginning of this year, focusing on Europe, where actually there is a big need for expertise, but also for investment. So I decided to basically put my experience at help for entrepreneurs there. So that's the start of a new journey.
Good for you. That's really good to see. And that's a tremendous background to bring into the ecosystem. And again, for anyone who's interested in connecting with Laurent, please do. His LinkedIn is there, and you can certainly link in with him there. To start us off, though, let's talk a little bit about really the European digital health ecosystem. And can you give us an idea of some of the, or at least one digital health technology that you've seen in Europe that's the most striking and the most impactful that you've seen over the last few years?
Yeah, I'll actually mention two that really struck me in the last few years, but also the last few months. I spent a lot more time on it. First one is the saliva diagnostic device that we start seeing that actually replacing the blood-based diagnostic. And here, maybe you can check two companies. One is Ziwig, Z-I-W-I-G. The other one is Lura Health. And both of them have devised one Ziwig that will diagnose endometriosis a lot earlier, a lot more precisely. And the other one, Lura, they are working on a chip that you would put on the tooth that could actually on a regular basis with Bluetooth connection do a number of diagnostic based on your saliva, which is revolutionary. Z-Wig already approved. Lura is more at the testing stage, but quite revolutionary. The other one that I found quite addressing an unmet need or an issue in healthcare is all the VR pain management device, which are actually managing pain and will actually replace a lot of the painkiller anesthetic product. They are for the moment being used in acute care at the hospital for oncology, surgery, and others, but could soon expand to replace also chronic pain management. So these ones are really addressing a need, patient need that could revolutionize healthcare and actually replace some of the either pharma product or existing technology.
That's brilliant. And so that's one of the things that you bring to the table that's so interesting is this this understanding, this deeper understanding of what's going on globally. And so along those lines, obviously, where everyone's paying very close attention to what's happening with these natural language processing algorithms and chat GPT like tools that are out there. Where do you see on the other side of the fence the digital medical devices playing a role in digital transformation over the next 5 years?
Look, I see a very huge impact. Maybe giving a few figures. When you think about digital health, there is about 15,000 companies identified. There's probably a lot more because nobody has done a full list. 15,000. There is about 25% in Europe. The majority is still in US, and then the rest, China, Africa, and of course India. That's the big space. If you take the medical device, it's a significant share of these. It's going to actually impact the research in big pharma or medtech, either AI research or the clinical trial. It's also going to impact everything in acute and chronic care. And as I said, it's either going to help healthcare professionals do their job so that the human time is spent for face-to-face interaction, or it is, going to, enable us to basically replace current devices.
That's phenomenal. And staying along that theme of looking at medical devices and their role in digital transformation, when you think about the global markets and you're looking at some of these digital medical devices, how do you think they're going to change healthcare delivery and kind of really impact patients' lives at the ground level?
The different ways. So first, if I talk about the care delivery, let's talk about this. It's the most maybe relevant or the one people maybe talk a bit less about. If you talk about acute care, which I refer to hospital or physician practice, for the moment, the quality of care is basically decreasing for many because of the lack of healthcare professional in terms of numbers, because of the share of time that healthcare professionals spend on administrative tasks and non-human interaction. You have actually a number of companies who are, optimizing the care prevention, the care alarm, so that it calls the specialist, it calls the nurse only when it is needed. I'll give an example of a company called Ward, WARD, 24/7. The concept that they have is actually that they are managing with AI the different alarm, sensor, and beeps in wards in hospital. And instead of having 5 beeps per patient that can beep, and then the issue for the nurse is to choose who to go to, which basically means they are wrong most of the time, and they may miss a life emergency. These actually AI-enabled device will actually pick the 1 or 2 that are life emergency, and the nurse will get less stress because she will know or he will know who to go to. 2, there will be better time and efficacy taking care of the patient. And 3, it means that you will have less patient going to ICU, better recovery, and at the end, probably also less cost, as the patient will be able to go out of the hospital faster.
That's fascinating. That's really where you see these things happening in a major way, when you start seeing that kind of value creation happening at that level. And so last question, I know you need to run too, but the idea is that we're seeing a lot of startups around Europe that are having fairly significant impact. Which ones in Europe are you seeing make an impact across a few nations? Since obviously European digital health is focused in France or in UK or Germany, Spain, Italy, wherever it might be. What are you seeing? One or two platforms really transcend across all the European Union?
Yeah, maybe two key points there is device will impact, as I said, research and clinical trial, will impact diagnostic, and will impact chronic and acute care, which is quite broad actually across the healthcare spectrum. To answering specifically your question, there are companies who start being like more than just one country. If I take clinical trial, companies like Castor are actually ones that start getting scale and will be able to go beyond just one country. They will probably aggregate other players that are more like country specific because they have already gained scale. They will need to get broader. And then let's be honest, anyone to succeed in Europe will need to get a foot in the US because it's going to give them scale. It's going to give them credibility. Another one that is very clear is big player like Okin, which people may have heard of, which is really research, focused company, having done deals with Sanofi, but also some others. They will definitely have impact across Europe, and they are present on both sides of the ocean. As I said, those who will be focusing on chronic care and acute care, oncology, cardio, they will definitely grow in impact and definitely either being acquired like Cardiolog by companies like Philips, they will then get impact across Europe, or they will grow by themselves and gain scale.
That's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. And again, Laurent, thank you so much for joining. We know how busy you are and greatly appreciate your time today, and certainly looking forward to seeing you at the Digital Health Week in New York City, the Hitlab Summit, of course, June 27, 2029. We'll be talking to you again then and hearing more of your insights on where digital health is going and what's happening, not just in the US, but around the world. So thank you again. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. And as you said, anyone interested to just a quick chat or a question on what I think about any of your projects or startup ideas, feel free. It's free service for the moment. So happy to talk.
Wonderful. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And again, just another way of being able to join the community is around joining in as sponsors for these sorts of events and discussions and learnings and studies, publications. We have so much happening in the digital health ecosystem and so many ways for people to connect. You can mentor people and be a mentor, an executive in residence, or an executive ex-resident. So please do reach out, hit the scan code with your cell phone if that's easier. And let's talk. Let's chat about how to connect you and how to get you involved. And then, of course, looking forward to our next session. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, one of our favorite startups founders and CEOs is Sana Gaspar, and she is the founder and the CEO of Rubatection, which is a novel device that's focusing on the ability to detect bed sores before they actually appear on a patient. And of course, as you all know, and I'm sure you've been reading, these new types of fungi that are traveling around the U.S. now and really becoming more endemic here in the United States, and the new infection levels that we're seeing, some of them again antibiotic resistant, are of great concern. So there's no more important time for a device like this than today. And so we're lucky to have Sana joining us. Good morning, Sana. How are you?
Good morning, Stan. I'm good. Happy Thursday. I'm
Yeah,
happy to
happy
be
National
here.
Doctors Day. Thank you for joining.
No, my pleasure. And I agree with you. The best way to address an infection is to prevent the wound.
That's fantastic. So let's jump into it. Start, if you could, just for the audience. Again, it's a global audience, so just be sensitive that some of them may not have backgrounds in the U.S. healthcare system. What is Rubatection? Tell us a little bit about it, and how does it help the aging population?
So Rubatection is a health tech company. We are working on addressing a growing human healthcare problem known as chronic wounds that can range from diabetic foot ulcers to bed sores or pressure injuries, venous leg ulcers, conditions that traditionally affect the elderly, but from a bed sore perspective or a pressure injury perspective can affect anyone with limited mobility. So we're working on developing an AI-enabled platform that allows any user to track that wound from inception to advanced wound development, to have the data needed to develop data-driven customized care plans. And how we help patients and patients within the AARP umbrella is traditionally AARP serves people who are 50 years or older in the US, people who are the highest risks for some of these chronic wounds and poor healing are people who are 65 years or older. So really targeting the core of the AARP population and the core of the population as people age and need additional support and their skin breaks down, and trying to help people age safely at home or in a facility if they're need additional support.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. What a novel and important device, really transformational for sure. And again, no surprise that you're a Carnegie Mellon product. We're big fans of Carnegie Mellon. That's where Glenn DeVries, one of our favorites, came from. And just an amazing school of engineering and inventions coming out of there. But tell us, from your experience, what drove you to this? Where did you find the passion? How did your passion lead to this inventing and building this kind of tool?
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for healthcare and for innovation or engineering. So my background is I have my doctorate in biomedical engineering, and my special focus in biomedical engineering is medical device development and commercialization. So for me, that was the way I felt that I could impact healthcare. You could be a doctor and you fix one patient at a time. You can make a device or a digital healthcare platform and help millions of people at one time. So that was really my passion. And I got into this problem while I was at Carnegie Mellon, actually, and learned about it through talking to a professor, and then from there turned it into my PhD project. I was really motivated by the fact that it was an area that was largely underserved from a technology standpoint, but it was affecting a large group of people. And it was also by virtue of the manual assessment technique ended up being a health disparity for people of color, or inadvertently creating a health disparity for people of color. And I realized that technology could have addressed that, and I wanted to build that technology.
It's incredible. Good for you. What a great vision you had, and what a wonderful application of that vision to actually helping society. And obviously there's a lot happening in digital health right now, and you're aware of it. You're seeing it on a regular basis. And talk a little bit about that for a second. When you step back and you look at everything, not just Rubatection, why is digital health so important in today's society? What is it about digital health that is so important in our ecosystem, in our society around the world?
Yeah, I think the most important part about digital health is its ability to democratize care and access. I think that's becoming increasingly important for various reasons. One, that we're seeing more extreme weather conditions. So you have people who once had access who are losing access, where digital health can help bring resources where they're not currently available. But that's also true if you're looking at just remote or rural environments or developing countries. It's also, I think, really important now, impacted partly by COVID, that people want to be more empowered to manage their own care. And the only way you can do that is if you take the technology out of the hospital and into the patient's hand. And digital health is a huge part of that. So developing technology that's easy to use, developing technology that provides ongoing monitoring, and allowing technology that enables remote patient monitoring, where patients can be in their home, be more proactive around their care, but still get expert insight and diagnosis and treatment, will help refocus the whole healthcare system in the US particularly on value-based care, because we're now allowing patients who are the most concerned about their health to focus on that prevention and early intervention. You can't do that without digital health platforms.
That's exactly right. That's spot on. What a great answer too. That's really inspirational. And when you look at your career and we look at what you're going to be doing with Rubatection and where you're going next, tell us a little bit about that. What are some of your ambitions over the next few years?
So I'm really excited about my vision. So my visions, my biggest vision is to really take this global. So, as we know, at a global level, the population is aging. Some of the birth rates are decreasing, and we are going to have a huge aging population with possibly insufficient amount of caregivers to care for them, where in empowering everyday people to have the expertise to do monitoring, to do assessment, and then to connect with a care provider remotely is going to literally save lives. And this is also particularly true for people of color. As we know, around the world globally, people of color are the largest subset of the population. Now, if you have a healthcare condition and a current clinical standard that doesn't even serve that population, the majority of the people in the world who are all going to age, I'm really excited about solving that problem and bringing that technology to global markets. So, for example, we've talked to a hospital in Brazil who was excited about what we're doing. We talked to a hospital in Africa and Ethiopia who was like, we need it now. Like, we have patients, we need a way to monitor it. And also very similar when we were in India. So it's clearly a global health problem, and it's a growing global health problem where there's a desperate need for technology. And we're really looking and really excited about solving that problem and bringing our solution to the global market and finding the right partners to do that. So, if anyone's interested in partnering with us for testing or for financing to fund the company, or even just to give us some feedback, we would love that. We're looking to work with, additional partners.
That's so exciting. Well, that's just wonderful. And thank you, Sana, so much for your leadership in the ecosystem, and certainly for your tireless efforts in building this technology and scaling it at the levels you're bringing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time today.
Wonderful. So that's, again, Rubatection that was invented and is being built by Sana Gaspard. So again, reach out to her if you have any interest in partnering with her, as she mentioned. And certainly she's a part of the Breakthrough Alliance as one of the innovators who's come in through the challenge and has been a part of the Breakthrough Alliance ecosystem on that level of getting into the ecosystem through winning the competition, and then now receiving a whole host of services from studies to promotions and things like that as a part of the Breakthrough Alliance and Hitlab, and certainly New York City EDC. So you can scan there if you want your company to join. It's a quick tweet-sized application, should take about 2 minutes, and you'll be on your way. And that closes May 12th, the second Friday of May. So again, to remember to apply there as soon as you can. So next up, speaking of innovative companies, we have with us today the team from Recovery Plus, and Peter Neve, a Columbia Business School alum and grad and entrepreneur with successful startups and exits, is here with us today to talk with his two folks joining him from Recovery Plus, and really go into the details of why we're seeing these sorts of startups so successful in today's post-pandemic / value-based care society. And I'll hand it over to Peter to give his background and give a little bit more about Recovery Plus. Peter.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity. So Recovery Plus is a digital health company with the mission of scaling access to cardiac rehabilitation. The process we employ has been under development for several years. We formally launched in 2022 and currently have headquarters in New York and Texas. I'm pleased today to introduce the team that's leading the effort to address a critical issue facing our healthcare system, and that is improving recovery and outcomes for individuals with cardiovascular disease. This includes hypertension, coronary heart disease, heart failure, and stroke, and affects nearly half of the US adult population. Cardiac rehabilitation programs work, but traditional sessions are expensive and inconvenient for many patients, leading to low compliance and attendance rates. Pardon. Only 20% of patients who could benefit from cardiac rehab are actually enrolled in a program. And this problem worsens when you add in common factors such as low income, rural locations, and overall poor health habits. So millions of people with treatable chronic condition do not take part in treatment that is proven to extend lives and lower hospital visits. So we're here to talk about digital health. Digital health is a critical part of solving this problem, which is one of scale. A typical clinic can address hundreds of patients, perhaps. We need to be able to address tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions. So rather than require weekly in-person sessions, the Recovery Plus approach is home-based, self-paced, and delivered virtually. It's customized to the needs of each individual, and treatment plans are updated based on patient data. Recovery Plus was built to scale. Tim Bilbrey is the president of Recovery Plus, and Jenny Martin is the chief nursing officer. They head up the clinical team here, and were both instrumental in conceiving of and implementing our approach. They're here to share their findings on the benefits of providing cardiac rehab remotely. Tim, Jenny?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, thank you, Peter. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Cardiovascular disease is a huge issue facing our country and the world. Fortunately, for decades, cardiac rehab has been a proven solution to help improve patient health and mitigate the impact of cardiovascular disease. Cardiac rehab is it's a guideline recommended care practice that includes clinical care management, supervised exercise training, risk factor modifications, and patient counseling for individuals with cardiovascular disease. And since the first cardiac rehab program opened in the 1960s, traditional cardiac rehab has been performed typically in an outpatient setting by interdisciplinary teams. And studies have shown that cardiac rehab can improve mortality and morbidity rates, improve quality of life, and reduce healthcare costs. So it's a win-win-win. I see this firsthand in my clinical practice as an exercise physiologist after receiving my clinical training in exercise physiology and working in traditional cardiac rehab for 15 years. And as a cardiac rehab manager for Baylor Scott and White for over 5 years, I decided to get my MBA so that I can become more effective in making a difference at helping and assisting patients in cardiac rehab, but at a much larger scale. I've realized that given the demand for cardiac rehab services and the limited supply of traditional cardiac rehab centers, we would not be able to meet all of the demands for people needing cardiac rehab. That's when I decided to develop a new way of delivering cardiac rehab patients to their home environment. As many professionals in the audience may already know, despite the given benefits of cardiac rehab, only 10 to 20% of eligible patients participate in a traditional center-based cardiac rehab program. And according to the American Association of Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehab, there are currently, in 2021, there are 2,230 cardiac rehab programs in the United States, with more than 15 million adults that are eligible for cardiac rehab. As Peter alluded to earlier, that is simply not enough.
Oh, I think Tim's frozen.
Yeah, Zoom. Yep, I'm back. Sorry about that. Zoom kicked me off, but it brought me right back on. But yeah, to wrap up, at Recovery Plus Health, we use technologies that provide improved accessibility and affordability solutions to home-based cardiac rehab. We are committed to using digital health to make more cardiac rehab more convenient, engaging and affecting more patients, and to help healthcare providers deliver better care to those with cardiovascular disease. And Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Yeah. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to discuss the benefits of our home-based cardiac rehab program. And I'm going to actually share a case study with you guys. So Jill was a patient of ours, 70 years old. She was referred to us by a cardiologist in New York back in 2022. She has coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. Her main concerns were her high blood pressure. She wanted to lose some weight, and her overall quality of life and mobility. She felt that her doctors were essentially too busy to discuss her many concerns, which were aches, pains, and her nutritional needs. So because of these things, Jill didn't think that she could exercise at all. She was able to complete the 12-week program and then currently continues to do well by exercising with one of our EPs once a week, and has actually progressed from being able to only do a few reps to now being able to do multiple sets of each exercise. She's also mentioned that it is especially nice to have someone regularly to talk to since she's home alone most of the time. So the question is, how do we achieve meaning engagement for patients like Jill when everything that we do is digital? Our patient's journey through home-based cardiac rehab program is pretty straightforward. We receive a referral from the cardiologist or primary care. We reach out to the patient, schedule and conduct a standard clinical assessment and testing to identify patient needs. The platform will generate a guideline concordant treatment plan, and our staff will ship the necessary supplies to the patient: scale, heart rate monitor, pulse oximeter, blood pressure cuff. The central piece of the program is personalized remote exercise therapy, supported by nutritional counseling and symptom and medication management. We have nurse practitioners and registered dietitians that are on hand to help with different aspects of the treatment plan. During the whole process, our integrated digital health platform works hard to streamline assessment, monitoring of vitals and symptoms daily. When Jill needs an adjustment in exercise intensity or her medication regimen, we can easily connect with her cardiologist. Safety, of course, is always priority, and so our digitally enabled care model allows a more precise intervention when complications begin to arise. We're able to track daily trends, symptoms, vitals, and decide if the patient needs a medication adjustment, an appointment with their specialist, or if something is causing the symptom that they're experiencing, which helps to decrease the need for a more extensive intervention, such as hospitalization. So in summary, our platform leverages the EMR, care management dashboard, provider portal, and of course, direct messaging systems. And we are able to provide near real-time personalized concierge service to empower and support our patients. And Peter, I'll go back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny and Tim. Thanks for going through that so clearly. So really, in summary, Recovery Plus was formed with the goal of scaling access to cardiac rehab. In service of that, you've heard about our home-based approach. In service of continue our mission to scale access to everyone, the technology that we use, the treatment app, we're developing a version of that that's self-paced and free. That will come out in about 2 months. So many thanks to Stan and Ansley and the Hitlab team for this opportunity. I want to say a special thank you to Dr. David Berger and our new cardiac rehab partners at Downstate Hospital in Brooklyn. You can hear from Dr. Berger in about an hour from now. And hope to see you all in New York in June at the Digital Health Symposium.
Thank you, Peter, and greatly appreciate the tremendous conversation with Jenny and Tim. Thank you all. That's
Thanks,
great.
Tim.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And when we start looking at where digital health is transforming the healthcare system, one of the major things that we've seen is the growth of these sorts of models, whether it's cardiac rehab or others, where because of the new policies that were put in place during the pandemic, we're seeing now those models grow to where we could have never imagined 4 years ago. And certainly Recovery Plus, again, with a Columbia MBA alum like Peter running the company, funding the company, getting it up and running, and it just shows how these sorts of models are taking the ecosystem by storm. We know it. We know that people would rather be at home. We know that they would rather do the recovery at home. And so it's just putting 1 + 1 together and getting 3. So again, just a wonderful presentation. And it's great to see this team, again, another New York City success story coming together and really building this nicely. And again, he mentioned the Innovator Summit at Columbia University coming up in June of 2023. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Bill Toronto, Laurent, Peter, all of your favorite people will be there, and we're looking forward to having them. Sana, and certainly we've got Namita Tandon coming in from Walgreens, running the clinical trials unit from Walgreens Pharmacies. She'll be there as well, and many others. So we've got just an incredible lineup for the summit happening in New York City, June 27, 28, and 29. There'll be all kinds of cocktail parties on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night, dinners, that sort of thing. So get yourself on the list. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. All right. It'll also be online for free. So if for whatever reason you can't make it in person, don't worry. As always, we want to make sure that everyone can enjoy and learn from these shared insights, no matter where they are in the world, for no cost. So next up, again, this is a fast moving program, the Symposium this month, in terms of really looking at the digital health reset. We have a lot to cover still today. And we are now going to move into understanding mobile health technology and understanding how it's actually shaping the ecosystem. And there's a lot happening with that. We know today, for instance, we know how just important mobile health technology is when it comes to whether, like we saw earlier with Andy and the head of Garmin Health, we saw just what is happening there. And we know that that kind of technology is shaping the world, whether you're wearing an Apple Watch or a Google Fit or a Garmin. We know that these sorts of technologies are making massive inroads to how patients are tracking their sleep, tracking their exercise, certainly tracking their stress, as you saw with the Garmin, so you can get a composite score entirely on your overall wellness. And so whether it's diet, stress, and certainly exercise and sleep, we know that those 4 variables can very much shape how people are doing and what's actually happening within their overall wellness factor and what's happening within their overall longevity factor. It's been a substantial lift these days as well. We've seen that more and more. People are talking about, not just wearing wearables to stay in shape and not just doing that and making sure that the short term is there. But now if you look at, I don't know how many of you read some of the Ray Kurzweil work that's come out over the last couple of weeks, but his now is a singularity that he's talked about in terms of people being able to attain immortality, which will obviously be interested in following that. Ray is an MIT product, and he's had this kind of singularity out there for some time now, a few decades, and 2030 is the new point there that he's raising. And again, he talks about not just the wellness factors, not just taking care of the immune system, but also doing so with a close eye on wearables and making sure that wearables are a big part of that mix. And so with us today to talk a little bit about that is our own Zita Manji, who heads up compliance with Haleon on the digital health side and has a lot to offer and when it comes to understanding just how this works and just what some of the major issues are from a regulatory standpoint around these emerging regulatory issues and around these emerging wearable issues. And so Zita, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. Happy to be here.
Of course,
really
not at all. I appreciate your time. We know how busy you are and how much you've got on your plate. So thanks for coming in and joining us for a few minutes here today with our audience from around the world. Just an amazing group online, hundreds of people joining in and taking time out of their day as well. But if you could just start with an introduction, just 1 minute about yourself and what you do and your expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a regulatory affairs professional. I've just completed 23 years in regulatory affairs this month, actually. And I come with a pharmacy background. So I have a PharmD and a master's in clinical pharmacy. And a few years ago, pre-pandemic, we're looking at emerging science technologies. And I really started to understand the potential for convergence of technologies and a different way of engaging for treatment, for looking at what is the potential of technology in terms of looking at real-time data, understanding how the patient is on an everyday basis experiencing disease, experiencing treatment, but also prevention and engaging earlier. It became pretty clear about the potential of intercepting early before disease flare. And with all this potential of research a few years ago, around about 2017, 2018, I was entering this space. I got the bug to say, okay, this is where I want to focus my career going forward in this space. And when you look at regulations, it's evolving, right? And the pace of innovation is accelerating. So as a regulatory affairs professional, you need to understand how are you going to adapt in that world. And so I was really happy to join the Columbia Business School Executive Ag Digital Health Series program, which really gave me a lot more insight into not just how do you manage regulatory approvals, but also how do you think, how do you ask the right questions, how do you analyze, how do you understand the business? Because from a regulatory affairs perspective, you have to create the story. And if you understand the business case, you can advise better and be a real business partner, but also translate that to the regulators.
That's great. And a terrific way to look at it too. And certainly, you know, you are very, very familiar with manufacturers and everything that they're doing, coming over from the GSK side, and now with Haleon, the consumer-facing spinoff of GSK. You're seeing a lot of digital and a lot of digital adoption within consumer, obviously wearable being a big one there. What are some of the trends you're seeing right now today that, again, nothing proprietary, but just in general across the wearable ecosystem on the consumer side?
Well, I think a major thing consumers are looking for is simplicity, right? I think if the engagement is too much friction, it becomes hard to adapt and use the tool on a regular basis, or even to understand, is this even working for me? Am I getting anything out of this, right? So I think the trends are going more towards how are you providing value and how is the user understanding that value? So I think getting into more precision is more of the trend versus generalities, but getting into more precision so that you really understand on an individual basis, how are you keeping in a health state, or what is your status of your condition, whatever that may be. So I think that's a evolving area that will get more precise and build more value so you can be more specific about the value.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, again, for those of you who are not fully aware, Zena is also a Columbia Business School alumna. She finished the digital health program and the certificate in business excellence at Columbia Business School executive education program. And she has a tremendous wealth of knowledge coming from there. And we have also joining us to add her 2 cents on the future of wearables and where they are going, Allison Darcy from Weebot. Hi, Allison, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Very well, thank you.
No, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy as well. And we're just really excited to have this conversation because we've been talking a lot about the digital health reset over the last year and really coming out of the pandemic. And so we'd love to hear your take on this. So tell us a little bit about cognitive therapy and what Weebot's doing on a mobile platform around cognitive therapy.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's my pleasure to talk to people about what we do. So Wobot is a digital therapeutics platform, and we build programs based on cognitive behavioral therapy, but delivered by what we call a relational agent. That is a conversational agent that does a little bit more than your sort of, you know, banking chatbot. But it is a conversational interface called Wobot, who is a fictional yellow character. Yeah, we have programs right now for adult general sort of mental health and emotional support. So based on depression and anxiety, for which obviously cognitive behavioral therapy is very well evidenced. We also have a program for postpartum depression, which is currently under pivotal trial for FDA clearance, and then also a program for adolescents as well.
It's amazing. And so talk a little bit about the value creation of this technology. Obviously, there's a lot happening in certainly in neurotech and brain tech and cognitive tech. Tell us a little bit about what makes Wobot different from everyone else out there.
That's a great question. I think what Wobot does really well is, I guess, sort of really coming to the promise of mobile health, right? Which is the whole promise of mobile health was that you had a device by your side the whole time. And of course, mostly we've leaned into that from a measurement perspective. But I think what was missing was something that could actually enable somebody to reach out and be able to use very good evidence-based tools in a moment of need as they arise. So the interesting thing in mental health is we have these wonderful models that we know are effective, like cognitive behavioral therapy. But unfortunately, if your therapist is not sort of with you at 2 a.m. as you're having a panic attack, or in the morning when you're struggling to get out of bed, then actually we're leaving clinical value on the table. So I think one of the things that Wobot does really well, and we did set out to solve this problem of engagement. And because, of course, in mental health, you know, the experience of struggling with your mental health, particularly of depression, is one of disengagement, right? You're disengaged from your life, from yourself, from your loved ones often. And so the ability to reach out and engage somebody in a moment of need, those moments wherein they can actually derive so much clinical value if they can use one of these tools, is tremendously potent. And I think that's really what makes Wobot different, and the task that we did well.
It's amazing. I know Zena's really excited about this too. Zena, please shoot. I know you got a ton of questions. Go ahead.
Hi, Zena.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, Alison. Good to see you again. Yeah, you know, I think this is a really interesting platform as I was learning more about it. And so some may ask, is this a replacement for the human therapist, right? And how do you measure against, or are you measuring against standard of care? And so it sounds like to me that it's a very different care model.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a great question, because one we get all of the time. So I think, you know, when on the face of it, because the interface is conversational, it sort of feels like a little bit dystopian particularly at the start, and people thought, and all the headlines were, you know, is this going to replace therapists' jobs? And of course, there is no replacement for human connection, right? That's absolutely not the point. The difference is, I think, whenever we have new technology come into the forum, is to understand the unique advantages and the unique disadvantages. And the limitations, right? So Wobot is, again, great at being there at 2 a.m., but it's never going to be a deeply nuanced and human connected conversation. And of course, our users, I think, readily understand that. But there is something very interesting about the engagement model. I was actually just going back to the original manual that Aaron Beck wrote in 1979 on cognitive behavioral therapy, and in it he actually suggests that therapists do house visits with their clients to help them, you know, to be there by their side when those moments that trigger their sort of negative self-views arise, and so they can help them, guide them through it. And of course, there's no therapist that has the time to do house visits, right? That's just like that's all but gone from contemporary therapy. But this is the role that a Wobot can have. So when you talk about outcomes, it's a really good question. I think we look at more side by side, again, where are the advantages, where are the limitations? But we do believe strongly that any kind of app that claims to have any kind of emotional support functionality needs to have some research that sort of supports that. And so we do have a full program of research. We've conducted, I think it's 11 randomized controlled trials now, and are just have an ongoing program of research for two reasons. One, again, because we believe in it, and you know, one must kind of take the time and effort to show the outcomes. But secondly, because we really believe in it as a way of developing the product, because we think that the field of digital therapeutics and mobile health in general is actually in its infancy, and we have a lot to learn. And so actually we do our best learning in clinical settings side by side with the clinicians, and we really believe in sort of elevating the role of the clinician. We think, you know, during the pandemic, we kind of like the explosion of telemedicine and telehealth, like it was important, and it was obviously safe for many years, but it also arguably just sort of redistributed the very rare resources that we already have, and it didn't really get at the fundamental problem. And so we want to know, what pieces can we take off the table or the desk of the clinician so that we can really elevate their role, and when a patient is with the therapist, they're really with the therapist and as engaged as they possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And as we see, you know, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, I mean, mental health has gotten a lot of focus. And as we look at, well, what is the quality of life and living well?
Yeah. That's right.
Your mental status is just so critical in all areas it impacts your physical health as well. So I'm wondering, in terms of how you describe the use of Woebot, it also seems like the immediacy of interaction, the proximity of access also seems to be important, or can be for certain patients or consumers are not diagnosed with, right? It could be you just in a very early stage, or determining do they have something going on and they just need some engagement. So in terms of that proximity, it seems like it would be important to see how is that translating into a modality. So what you describe, I think, is it's not replacing the clinician, but it's another modality that can be added to the overall therapeutic outcome or therapeutic tools that a therapist could use.
That's right. And actually that we have a lot of success in that model. And we hear things back from clinicians who refer Woebot to their patients. Things like, my patient comes back more ready for therapy, more educated, and it's sort of like amplifying their voice in between sessions. Because of course, the irony of the clinic, and that's sort of what I call the therapeutic architecture, is that you're actually, you have to go somewhere, right? Obviously there's like the convenience piece, but it can some of that architecture can actually undermine somebody's ability to engage. And you're typically kind of, you're getting yourself together for your therapy appointment. And then I certainly had this experience when I was treating younger people. I knew as soon as they walked out of my office, it's kind of like in one ear, out the other. Like, one of the things we know is therapy doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I think our system is quite fragmented right now. And by definition, we tend to see people when things are a little bit more severe. But one of the intentions behind Woebot was like, could we bring it back to the sort of human experience? And therefore, could we engage people a little earlier in some of these great tools from CBT? That when, you learn about CBT, I think as a clinician, you just think, wow, we should be teaching this stuff in schools. This is just very good life advice. How can you stop yourself and challenge your thinking and see if there's any distortions therein? And so we in our free version of Woebot that's available in the app stores, that is really very kind of a wellness focused kind of solution that makes us completely agnostic to diagnosis and actually doesn't use a lot of particularly, it doesn't use any clinical language really. Therein Woebot really shares that distorted thinking is just kind of part of the human experience, because we really believe mental health will be viewed the way that exercise was viewed 20 years ago. I think we're getting to the point where we realize, and the pandemic really helped this along, of course, that mental health is always with you and everybody has it, and you sort of have to look after it. So if we can accomplish that in a small way in tiny conversations, I think that's a good thing. The important thing is, of course, we don't overstep, and so there's a lot of barriers in place, I guess, where in Woebot sort of will call out like, okay, this is about the limitation of what I can help with.
And it sounds like I believe there's some studies or reporting that I came across and that you mentioned that consumers or users are actually can be more open with with this tool, even more so. Maybe it differs by users. I'd like to understand that from you, but it seems like don't have that barrier, but can express more authentically.
That's right. Before we created Woebot, there was an interesting study that was conducted in Southern California where they randomized people to two conditions. Both conditions got this virtual therapist called Ellie. It was a very sophisticated technology, but one of the groups was told that there's a human behind what Ellie says. And the group that actually was told the truth, which is this is just an AI, were actually more willing to disclose to the virtual therapist. So that was really interesting. And that was a really nicely designed, robust study. But we do find we did an interesting study a few years ago wherein we delivered something called the Working Alliance Inventory, which is really sort of a measure that's used in traditional treatment outcomes research to look at things like therapeutic bond. And we found that in just 3 to 5 days, Wobot created a bond with users that was non-inferior to that created by human therapists for in comparison studies against which we compared the scores. And the thing that's interesting there is we did the study not to show, hey, we're as good as a human or we're comparable, but it was to say, it was in answer to, I think, one of the big assumptions that we've had for so long, which is digital solutions will always be limited because you don't have this human connection. Whereas when you look at the things that the human connection is also delivering, it's things like, I feel heard, I don't feel judged, I trust this, and I can reach out anytime. This person is there for me whenever I need help. And of course, those are things that digital can actually achieve. And so and that's what we demonstrate. Again, it's not a human connection and it never will be. And people don't mistake it for such. But there are elements there that we think can enhance the findings and the data that you can get from a purely digital solution. And that's going to be really important for scaling our overall approach to sort of lowering the burden of suffering in the population.
So it sounds like the potential here is actually getting more information from the user in terms of what they're experiencing in a moment and how that engagement is helping them feel. And you can track that with the engagement with this tool, or it can be tracked. Even the user, I'm assuming, can also see how they're doing.
That's right.
You mentioned about the different, the engagement, and that you can measure that engagement. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's how do you know that you have success? And since,
great question.
Since mental health can be so complex, and environments also impact people's mental state, and the environment can be so diverse and very different.
That's right.
So how do you measure? How do you know you're measuring for success? And the other aspect is that engagement, that level of engagement, which I thought was really interesting when we talked about earlier about a therapeutic dose.
Yes, that's really I guess it's the promise of a platform like ours, is that we have scale. And so we can look at like different subpopulations and how they are responding in different ways and for whom what works and under what circumstances. And that is really exciting from a research point of view. And I think how do we know we're having impact is a brilliant question. So we do the trials and we do we have those, obviously outcomes, and we do PROs. But in the basic unit of a single engagement, we think the ground truth is, do you feel better? Like, does the person feel better after doing what is often quite difficult work, right? So we're not here to just kind of give people compliments and things. We're actually bringing them through a therapeutic technique where they are confronting their negative thoughts or confronting their role in an interpersonal dispute, which can be quite painful. And so how do you feel now? Better, same, or worse? That becomes one of the key pieces of learning that we deliver. So we ask that question after every tool, any therapeutic technique. And then, but what we're finding is that we did a study where we modeled engagement clusters, and we did find individual differences. So, which I think is it's very interesting. So we found, for example, that some people use Wobot more efficiently, so they use it very frequently, and which we used to call sort of like an antibiotic kind of usage, sort of every day for about 2 weeks. And they have very steep symptom reductions, even if they start in a more symptomatic range, versus other people who are more sort of, as painkiller, if you like, sort of come in whenever they as needed, and kind of pop out, but might re-engage 6 months later, 8 months later. And it's fascinating. And so we used to think about modeling something that we called sort of maybe it's meaningful engagement, like what constitutes that really potent kind of encounter. But that's right. We've moved now to a concept of potency, like what is the right encounter for the right person at the right time. And That's fascinating, and I hope that we're able to continue to kind of contribute to the field about those things.
I think
this is great. Well, yeah, thank you both for joining today. We're out of time. I apologize, but we are running long.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you, Allison. Thank you, Zena, for a wonderful panel.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So just amazing to see what's happening in that field and what Woebot has been able to bring to the table. Very excited. Lots happening, certainly in neurotech, in cognitive tech, and brain tech. So keep your eyes open on that one for sure. And again, we're looking at this digital health definition. And as we do, we talked a little bit earlier about Recovery Plus and how that as a technology company and a platform has already made massive inroads to helping patients and helping them remotely. And another value-based care model and platform that's having tremendous impact within the ecosystem and helping patients directly is One True Health. And the CEO of One True Health is with us today, Sean Smith. Sean, welcome to the symposium. And if you could, let's start off with a little bit more about your background and One True Health.
Well, sure. And thank you, Stan. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. My background, I've been in healthcare technology since the mid 80s, selling patient care systems and IBM 3090 mainframes, which will show you all the gray hair that I have. But been in the health IT industry all over 35 years, and that's my background. This is my fourth startup company in digital health. So I have a couple of great co-founders that also have multiple successful exits within digital health. At One True Health, we are a digital health company based in Austin, Texas, and we're focused on putting patients in control of their medical records and their medical data. And we do so by providing both a full, accurate, vetted, complete personal health record from all past encounters, wearable devices, RPM devices, real-time health information, as well as past. And we consolidate it, make it accurate, and present it in a way that a patient can actually understand. And then we link that to a patient engagement platform. And that idea there is to provide actionable insights that keep a patient compliant on care plans and care instructions and help them to maintain their health and wellness. And we're also a Hitlab Breakthrough Alliance member. So proud to be part of the family.
No, seriously, your board membership there is tremendous. The leadership that you guys are giving, particularly with folks like Bill Toronto on the board and others, is just phenomenal. And let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the ecosystem. What you're seeing, sure, obviously, in the ecosystem is really important to this audience, and it's really going to focus for our conversation over the next 15 minutes here, 10 minutes, is patient engagement. You guys are so good at that. It's at the crux of so many digital health implementations, integrations into the ecosystem, and it's the core to making sure that patients are getting the full outcomes and the full benefits of a digital health platform. What is your secret to success here? You guys have seen tremendous uptake. Why are you seeing that? And what are you doing a little bit differently with patient engagement that maybe we don't see across all these other platforms?
Well, and I appreciate that question. There are certainly a lot of different solutions. I was at the Vive conference that Bill Toronto was just at, and AARP, or Age Tech Collaborative Group, had a whole series of wonderful companies that were out there presenting new forms and ways of engaging with seniors. Everything from chat individuals to a unique platform to address social isolation and loneliness. These were all ways of engaging with seniors, engaging with patients. So as a company also in that space and providing digital health solutions to us, it means patient engagement means meeting the patient where they are. That's really what it's all about. And as a digital health company, we have to provide a personalized experience where they are, and to give a patient the information, the education, and the guided actions that they need in order to get healthy and to stay healthy. That's really what it's all about from our perspective. But there's a lot behind the scenes because, again, we've got folks that are involving in HIPAA compliant messaging solutions. There are folks that are using avatars now in a leading edge way of engaging the patient. We're looking at more holistic view of assisting. Our customers are clinical practices, hospitals, senior living communities, and helping to provide an overall approach for care coordination in our way of delivering patient engagement. So that's what makes us a little bit different. That care plan compliance, involving family members and caregivers, sharing data back to the healthcare practitioners, and doing so in a meaningful, coordinated way that keeps a patient compliant with their care plan instructions.
That's amazing. That really isn't. And when you look at some of the patient engagement metrics, what are some of the key metrics, some of the KPIs that you guys are following there?
Well, it's interesting. You've got a lot of people talking about quality in general and quality scores, right? And some are defining that as just patient satisfaction. And we'll send them a survey and we'll see what the results are. Or we certainly know all the different quality metrics and scores, especially for serving at-risk populations that ACOs and IPAs and hospitals and health systems are having to report. For us, it's really simple. It's whether or not it's sticky. Do they use it? Are they really truly engaged on a daily basis? Are we providing the value that they need that proves that they're using the system and they're getting accruing benefits from it? So it's really from, I'm very pragmatic, Stan, when it comes to whether or not you've got high quality, and you have high quality if you can demonstrate use of the system.
And we had Hitlab had an executive salon earlier this month, and you were a part of that, and it was all about patient engagement and certainly the importance of patient engagement in value-based care. I mean, if it's not the most important thing, it's one of the most important things for value-based care to succeed. Talk a little bit about, you were in that session, talk a little bit about it, and talk about the folks that you connected with, some of the folks who were there, and some of the themes that came out of that discussion that really that resonated with you and all the good work you're doing at One True Health.
Well, let me start off by giving some props over to the way of Hitlab here. If you're on this call and you haven't really learned more about the Breakthrough Alliance, I highly encourage you to go. It's been a tremendously valuable partnership and relationship with Hitlab. And part of that was not only a heuristic analysis, really most detailed analysis I've seen in my career on the usability and the user interface of our products, but they also helped to conduct an executive salon. And that was, in our case, 25 C-suite executives, CEOs from hospitals, rural and urban, senior living community executives. We had high-level innovation executives from ACOs and health plans. Just tremendous audience. 25 people came in and they listened to us present on a new solution that we're coming and releasing in about 2 months, focused on patient engagement for seniors via a tablet platform. And we presented what our thoughts are, our assumptions, where we thought the market was, and then we went off into breakout groups. And these individuals provided great feedback, really common themes that we heard, Stan, amongst all 3 of the breakout groups that we had, related to just, how do they engage the patients in their own facilities, their own organizations? What are the challenges? What are the systems they are using, and how can we do it better? So, out of that, there were, if you don't mind, I'll share a few of the common themes that came out of that salon. First was, who were we really engaging? So, patient engagement obviously indicates we're engaging the patient, but in today's world, especially if it's a senior patient, and that was our focus for the salon, it's not just the patient, but it's also family members and caregivers who are likely there to assist the patient as they're coordinating their efforts and maintaining their care plan compliance. And those individuals have a lot of different needs and different requirements that we have to reach. So we have to be designing solutions for everyone within the care network and providing them specific and personalized views that will help that patient in their path to age well and to maintain their health and wellness. So if we know who we're really engaging, the second common theme was, where are you engaging them? And one of the attendees used a phrase I hadn't heard. He called it the home spittle, right? Obviously, we're doing a lot of home-based care now. 40% of American seniors didn't see a physician in person or through telehealth during the pandemic. And because of the workforce issues with clinical practices, hospitals, and senior living communities, patient engagement, just physically engaging the patient and bringing them back into the health system, is an issue right now for these organizations. So if we agree that there's a trend to more home-based care and people want to be at home, we've got people, have with the convenience of ordering products and services from their homes, what can we do to improve the patient engagement from the home? But, this creates a workflow issue. You've got appointment and scheduling. You have reminders that need to be given. It might be social determinants of health. What if this patient was food insecure or needed transportation? How is that arranged? How are the family members and caregivers involved? What kind of educational content needs to be delivered over to really make things happen correctly within that environment? And then finally, how do you engage the practitioners with that? So how do we do that in a home-based setting? Third common theme was, why will the patient engage with your system? And this really gets to the crux of it as offering a digital health solution. We all know it's got to be user-friendly and it needs to have a positive user experience, but it really needs to accommodate non-tech savvy people, as well as ones that are, you can't really assume that especially in a senior population, that they've got a smart device. And my father-in-law still has a flip phone. So how do we engage patients where they are? and give them daily value in the process. And then finally, the last theme was really a barrier to engagement, and that was trust. Really interesting to have that as a theme. People that view that the whole system is being financially driven. So therefore, how can we trust what you're doing? Are you just trying to dip into my pockets and bill for an encounter? Second is that the patient care process is often viewed by individuals as still being very cumbersome and time consuming. So if you're going to focus at home, what can the technology do to improve and address that issue of trust? And finally, can you assure that your privacy isn't being compromised? We all know of the issues with senior fraud. We all know issues of just sharing data and exposing that data. How can you, if you're offering a new solution to a patient, assure them and provide that trust that their data is being protected? As you can see, incredible feedback from these C-suite members, and it's just a testament to the network that Hitlab has provided invaluable information and guidance for us as we completed the work on our solution.
No, that's super kind of you. Thank you for that. And again, the team here that puts those together is, just is incredible and very passionate about what they do in terms of building these Delphi models of bringing experts together to help improve products, help improve ecosystems. And so certainly for those of you who are not familiar with heuristic analysis, it's one of the 37 different models that Hitlab uses as a part of their research toolkit to help generate evidence for startups around the world in a very efficient way in 30 to 60 days instead of sometimes 2 to 3 years. And so it is something that is important today more than ever because of the current funding environment. So, again, Sean, thank you for that, really detailed and well-informed analysis of patient engagement, some of the key items there, and how it is making that difference and making that inroads into improving value-based care. And I think one of the things that we're talking about across all of the different programs that we run at the lab is certainly diversity, equity, inclusion, and we've been doing that for since the beginning. Hitlab was founded on the ethic of using digital to improve health equity. 25 years ago, actually, this is our 25th anniversary. So the idea here is when you look at patient engagement, what is it about patient engagement that can help improve health equity?
Well, it's a huge issue and problem. Even before the pandemic, lower income seniors and seniors of color were disproportionately affected with respect to access to care, and especially in rural communities. And we have customers that are in rural hospitals, rural clinics at One True Health. So that was before the pandemic. The pandemic just supersized that issue with respect to, you've got issues that are just incredibly focused problems with respect to people that live in lower income communities of just accessing care or accessing information that's going to give them, again, those actionable insights on how to maintain their own health at home, how to eat right, how to move, good hydration, sleep quality, stress management. I think patient engagement systems and solutions can find a way of reaching that population. And in fact, it's one of the areas where we're focused on the tablet-based functionality, because a lot of these individuals, lower income and seniors of color, don't have the actual infrastructure, the technology in their home. So if we're providing a tablet with 5G and unlimited data as part of that, we're giving them a platform to start fostering that engagement. So we're thinking about that very seriously at One True Health, but it's an area that needs, I think, a lot of focused attention and effort in order to arrive at the right kind of solution for those people that are desperately in need of access to care and access to actionable information.
Here. That's wonderful. Sean, thank you very much. Just a tremendous amount of work, tremendous work that you're doing. Very impressive with what you've accomplished. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
No, really a pleasure having you. Thank you again. So just as we're walking through this idea of what is digital health today coming out of the pandemic, and as we're looking at these different themes that are emerging from today's discussion, we're seeing that underlying everything are the fact that we saw a convergence between value-based care growing rapidly during the pandemic and the convergence of a lot of these new digital health platforms growing rapidly. Some of them under the regulatory expedited use authorizations, and some of them with the policies being changed for certainly a lot more remote care, a lot more telemedicine, et cetera. And we're seeing the result of that. And that's why we entitled today's symposium, Revisiting the Basics of Digital Health, because within these multiple megatrends, if you will, converging, we're seeing some of the basics of digital health shifting. And I think one of the biggest trends we've seen, certainly over the last 3 years, has been around the clinical trial supply chain. And there really is no other company that knows clinical trials and the supply chain better than Information Media Corporation, who's been around for over 20 years now. This is a company that's a stalwart within the clinical trials industry. And to talk a little bit about that are two of their senior leaders today, Ian McLeod and Joanne Waters, to discuss what IMC is doing and how they are virtualizing the clinical trial supply chain with Hitlab's own Greg Bauer. Greg, handing the virtual podium over to you.
Thank you, Stan, very much. It's great to be able to join the group here. Yeah, we all know about the importance of adherence in clinical trials in terms of driving the success of those trials, especially when it comes to securing a timely approval for specific titrations, doses and frequency of use. But how do we know when patients fall out of their prescribed protocols, and what can we do about this? As you mentioned, we've got Joanne and Ian. I'm going to pose this first question to Joanne. What can, beyond what I just mentioned, what are some of the reasons it's important for patients to take their medication properly?
Hi, Greg. Thanks very much for that. So can you hear me okay? I'm in a public situation here, so I want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep.
We're good? Okay.
Yep.
Nice to be on the panel. Thanks very much for that. It's interesting you talk about, the theme of this panel today is the basics, right, of digital health. And when you talk about the biggest area of concern and the biggest cost to healthcare is what they call medication non-compliance or non-adherence, meaning did a patient take their medicine as they were supposed to? And we are human, and a lot of the data has shown over these 2 decades that we don't take medicine as we're supposed to. So we develop these solutions and tools to help patients. So, improving patient health outcomes is a major part of that. We have actionable insights that we can work with. The basics of understanding how medicine is taken is really the reason why we exist, and we help research teams with that, actually. Yeah.
So how do we go about measuring adherence, Joanne? What's the kind of a process, or what are some of the means by which we do that today?
Yeah, that's the important question, right? So reliably, we would normally go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, Joanne, how are you doing with your medicine? And I'll say, well, I'm doing pretty good. I'm taking it as I should be. But in fact, I'm really not. So we design and customize products that actually will record using sensors. So as an example, if you have a standard pharmacy pill bottle, when you open the bottle, we can record the date and time that bottle is opened. So that's really the foundation of getting the adherence data that we do need to then help patients who actually start to fall off. You think you're actually taking it as you should, and we can see that you're actually not doing that. So we have these smart pill bottles. We have smart blister packaging technology that's encompassed with all types of set up treatment parameters that help patients know why they have to take their medicine as they should.
So that's great. So who are the people who are managing a trial that stand the most to gain from having that sort of real-time knowledge of the patient adherence? Who are the folks that are most concerned about that, or at least if they're not, why should they be?
Yeah, that's the question, and we feel it touches every point along the supply chain. If you were, as an example, a pharmaceutical sponsor and you're developing a new medicinal product, you really want to make sure that the drug is taken as it should be. You also want to protect the drug. So a lot of those clinical trials are blister format to protect the drug and make sure it's not, there's no degradation of the product itself. So the sponsor for sure has a major interest in that to help de-risk the clinical trial. And as per the FDA, they of course, patient safety, right? So to ensure that the medicinal product is at the right dose, given to the right patient at the right time. And it's that type of data. So if you're into clinical supplies, each one of those types of devices has a unique identifier, which can actually be traceable throughout the entire supply chain. So from the moment the packaging happens, from the moment the pill is dispensed to a patient, then back to a patient at home, we can use what's called remote monitoring. So when patients take their medicine at home, we can also see that visibility extended to a patient's home. So it's pretty critical. So it really touches everyone from the sponsor, from the clinical research organization who actually talks to patients, and as well to improve the patient health outcomes. So it touches from the end to end of a life cycle of a drug journey, really.
That's fascinating. And I think that also to not be short shrifted, so to speak, is the patient, him or herself, right? I mean, if we're doing a trial on a new pain medication and they fall off their regimen and they wind up saying, oh, geez, I didn't take it yesterday, so I double dosed today. There's a toxicity factor there too, right? I mean, it's a big issue.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see a lot of pain research. You know, anesthesiology and pain is a very, very expensive trial, one of the top ones for costs of running a pain trial. And we see the evidence that, and it's a bit scary as well, is because the patients really, you know, they start out as they're supposed to take the pain meds, you know, to help alleviate maybe post-surgery or something along those lines. And then it'll stop for a little while where they don't take any medicine and then come again on a weekend. And all of a sudden we see they're taking more medicine. And this is weeks after possible surgeries, etc. So it really does bring awareness to research teams of how patients are taking them and how can we prevent that sort of dosing behavior to help with better health outcomes for the patient and prevent possible addiction rather than dealing with the addiction cycle after it happens. So pain is a big area of concern.
Yeah, and so even actually, Joanne, beyond the pain, any condition that we're evaluating new standards of care associated with, Ian, you know, as the product manager, you get to see all the reporting and analytics that help the trial managers track the adherence. Can you speak to some of the tools that you've seen and how you've been able to implement those tools to improve is it with the CRO or who's it with that you're really working with to make sure that you're getting real-time adherence information, not a week or two later?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me on the panel. So real time is something that we strive for, and our medication tracking devices, our smart bottles, our smart packages, they record dose removals and they store it on device permanently. So that is on the device awaiting upload to our cloud where it can be analyzed and shown as you're describing. And so ways that we ensure that it is as real time as possible is with our scanning technology and our patient reminders system. So we have a way for patients to very easily tap their phones to their devices, retrieve that data and upload it for analysis. And some of the things that our researchers see with this data is who has been at a level of site versus site, who has been more adherent or less adherent. That's something that has been difficult to do before now, but because of our ability to aggregate across sites, we can compare one site versus another site, looking for systemic problems with patient adherence one way or the other. I'll also say that patterns that strike a chord from our data, something that stands out right away, is a pattern that we've noticed and detected often called the deblistering pattern. And this is something that's very important for blistered medications. And it's something that happens when a patient removes all their doses all at once from a blister package, probably for the sake of convenience, transferring from blister package to a Ziploc bag, something that's more convenient for them to take out of the house and move around with them. And we can flag this, we can notice it right away. And it is vitally important for clinicians and clinical trials to be aware of these behaviors. Without a smart package, there would be no way of knowing that this is occurring. And so that's another example of one of the things that we've been able to notice immediately as soon as the data comes in and be able to make actionable recommendations upon.
So that's an interesting point about the actionable activities and so on. And you talked about clinical sites or trial sites. Can you maybe speak a little bit more for the audience about what a clinical trial site is and how many there might be, especially if you're in a phase 2 or phase 3 trial?
Definitely, yes. So clinical trials take place across multiple different locations, often different cities, potentially even different countries. And so when we say site, that's what we're referring to, is a certain location, typically a doctor's office or a clinic, where the patients come in to enroll in the trial and they return there for follow-up visits. And so your point about, sorry, what was your original question about the site?
Yeah, I was just referencing for everybody's edification, what sort of defining our terms around what a clinical trial site is, and that, a contract research organization may have a number of sites, and that your reporting will then show comparative data on how the different sites are going. But having that real-time data helps them communicate with their patients, right? To make sure, hey, I see, Johnny, that you've fallen off.
Exactly.
Can you explain it? So that's where I was kind of going around.
Yeah.
Using the analytics to manage the adherence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
can I pipe in there?
By all means, go ahead, Joanne.
Sorry. Yeah, so how I see that actually, Greg, is this. So what's very interesting about the Certiscan platform is this, right? So you can have your sites across the globe, as Ian mentions, and across cities, right? So what our dashboard you can do is, say, site in Chicago is, the enrollment is going well and their adherence scores are, let's say, 65%. But then all of a sudden, New York's site, where the patients come and get their medicine and come to get their blood drawn and these sorts of activities, all of a sudden, New York, for some reason, their adherence scores are like 95. So we can show the sponsor and who's ever funding these trials to say, why is New York doing so much better at adherence than Chicago? And then at that point as well, it could be the CRO team maybe needs to be, retrained or something. They can look at and dig deep down into why enrollment is happening better and more quickly at one location versus the other, and see the adherence scores of why. And when you talk about what the FDA is saying about the diversity and reaching more for the trial populations, and the gentleman Sean before mentioned, the rural clinics, etc. The outreach using smart packaging and smart solutions is that much better now, because you can reach places where you didn't have to. So instead of a patient driving 3 hours to go to a site, they can use remote monitoring and our smart packaging to enter into a discussion with the CRA to say, hey, how are you doing, Johnny, with your medicine? You're doing really well, except what happened on the weekend. So it really empowers the patient, and it is good for engagement between the site or the physician and the patient. So site is really, the dashboards of understanding the site activity is really, really crucial.
What's interesting about that, Joanne, is, of course, that I think a third of the cost of managing and running a clinical trial is associated with patient recruitment, retention, adherence, and so on. And if patients fall off, typically many will after 3 to 6 months, the sponsor and the CRO have to go out and replace those people to get more participants. So that can become a very expensive proposition if you're not managing the timely adherence, and especially as you just referenced, the underserved populations, the health equity or the inequity in certain groups that have a harder time inherently adhering because of where they are and what their circumstances are.
Yeah. And also a very critical, important point as well is why a patient may stop participating in the trial is because maybe they don't feel well. Maybe they're having a serious adverse event, and then typically they'll drop out, or they just may pretend that they're taking their medicine when they're really not. So it's this type of engagement that we can help and dig down into why isn't the patient taking their medicine. Oh, Johnny, you're having side effects. Okay, well, I understand. Thank you for telling me. So can I see, I'm going to tap my smart package and see that Johnny's been way off on his meds. So that is where, again, it's all about improving the patient health outcome and educating the patient as well.
And it's interesting. I know we wanted to talk about patient engagement and empowerment and also patient centricity. And I think that, Sean Smith just now did a really nice job, speaking to, meeting the patients where they are. And with your tools and with your capacity to kind of see what this is about, can you speak to how the trials can be enhanced with a greater sense of centricity, or at least a greater awareness about it? Maybe Ian, you want to take a stab at that?
Definitely, yeah. One of the really incredible things about smart packaging is that the clinical trials and the patients can sort of decide what level of engagement they want to deploy, starting from simple, which is still very empowering. And as they become more comfortable and experienced with smart packaging, it can move up to more sophisticated and more powerful levels of engagement. I'll talk about two hypothetical trials. Trial 1 uses smart packaging just for passive tracking and after the fact review, which is incredibly powerful. Showing patients a graph or a calendar of their adherence is quite eye-opening. It can motivate them to stay on track if they're doing well, or to try a little harder if their adherence isn't really what it needs to be. But one drawback to this is that it's after the fact. So it is patient-centric, but the patient is not getting as much as they could out of it compared to hypothetical trial number 2, where we're using real-time remote monitoring. We give patients an app that can connect to their smart packaging and make them more informed and active in their own care. I like to use the point of comparison of a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. Before such fitness tracking tools, it was theoretically possible for people to journal and record all of their health and fitness data, but it was impractical. Now, millions of people around the world are passively and easily tracking and improving their health and fitness, and the same can be true of medication adherence with these smart packaging app deployment solutions.
That's terrific, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Just a tremendous segment, and terrific work. Joanne and Ian, what you guys are doing is truly spectacular and heroic on so many levels. And the data that you're finding is brilliant. And Greg, thank you again for moderating an expert panel on this. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
And, again, you've got the LinkedIn there, and you've got the QR code. If you want to hear more from this incredibly innovative group and you want to be more part of what they're doing, then do connect with them. If you want, certainly connect with me as well on LinkedIn, and I can do an intro over to Joanne, who's a managing director at IMC and can help get you more information straight away. And with that, very happy to have with us next the CEO of Downstate Medical Center, Dr. David Berger, to take us from medication adherence to talking more about how hospitals are evaluating digital health solutions and what they're looking at when they do this. But first, David, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Tell the audience a little bit about your background.
So Stan, I am a surgeon by training, actually a surgical oncologist trained at MD Anderson in Houston. And I've been on a journey in terms of hospital administration for the last 20 years. I was the chief operating officer at Baylor St. Luke's in Houston. And now I am the CEO at Downstate. I have an extensive interest in digital health, having implemented numerous digital health solutions, as well as serving on the advisory board of numerous digital health startups.
That's incredible. And if you could, too, please give us an idea of what some of the things that Downstate is doing within this situation. And we'll hand the virtual podium over to you while you walk through this a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So let me share my slides. And
we can see them. They look good. Yeah, addressing problems. There you go.
So I'm going to talk quickly about how I think about digital health solution and implementing it in the hospital. So the first thing is to make sure that the solution is addressing a major problem. And these are the 6 pivotal issues for the industry in 2023 as identified by PricewaterhouseCoopers. I actually combined 2 of these into what I believe is the most important issue, and that is how we solve clinical workforce shortages by using digital health. And then the second issue is obviously confronting affordability and disrupting costs coming out of the pandemic. But certainly the first thing is how we can apply digital health to solving some of the clinical workforce issues. So first thing, you need to address a major problem facing the hospital or the healthcare system. Secondly, I look at the team, and this is the UConn 2016 national champion women's basketball team. 4 straight national championships for Breanna Stewart, one of the greatest basketball players, women basketball players in history. But I want to know who's on the team of the digital health company. Specifically, what's their previous experience and who is the CEO and how are they engaged? But most importantly, I want to make sure that there's a clinical person on the team within the company, because having a clinical person is, I believe, is essential because they really understand how care is delivered within the institution. The other thing that I find that's very important, especially for a clinical solution, is fine if I'm the CEO and I like something, that's great, but I need to have a clinical champion within the institution that is also interested in the solution, because those are the people within the organization that have influence and credibility. Even though I'm a physician, I need a physician within my hospital who is interested in the solution, is engaged, and has capacity to work with the company in order to make sure that there's a successful implementation. The next thing is the solution needs to fit into the hospital's IT priorities. And there is a lot of things going on within the hospital in terms of IT priorities. A lot of us are moving to the cloud for enhanced cybersecurity. We are very involved in terms of working with our EHR and trying to implement our electronic health records. Then there's the back office side in terms of revenue cycle, trying to apply AI to enhance coding and billing. So the solution really needs to fit in the priorities, and there needs to be capacity within the IT infrastructure within the hospital itself. Next thing is really, and this is one of the most critical, is what is the company's implementation plan? How much of the implementation is being taken on by the company itself, and how much is being put on the institution? And my preference is to make sure that we have an implementation plan that is predominantly the responsibility of the company that we're engaged with, and there is a minimal amount of responsibility upon my people and my IT systems. And the other thing with implementation is, does this decrease the work of the end user? So I'll give you an example of a poor implementation in an institution I worked at previously, where the bulk of it was a bedboard solution, meaning they were tracking patient movement throughout the hospital, and especially looking at the issue of patient discharge. In order to get the trigger on the bedboard, the nurse who was discharging the patient had to trigger the solution. And what we found was that was not happening. And the reason that was not happening was because when a nurse triggers the bedboard to say there's a discharge, they get a new patient. So essentially, you're creating more work for that particular nurse. So you really have to think about your implementation, who within the institution is responsible for triggering the various events, and are you actually decreasing the work of the people that it's intended to help? And then most importantly is, what is your business model? So you heard from Recovery Plus this morning, and that is a company that we are currently actively looking at. And one of the reasons that I'm excited about Recovery Plus is because there is a CPT code associated with what they're trying to do, meaning they can actually bill for the service, meaning, again, there's no charge to the hospital for implementing the solution. So if there's going to be a cost to the hospital, and most of these digital solutions, it's a SaaS model, it's a cost to the hospital, it becomes very, very difficult to justify. The easiest way to get a CEO's attention is if you can link your service to a code, a billing code, and get reimbursement directly. The second most important business model that I tend to like is one where you're enhancing our revenue. So the solution is being put in place and somehow it provides us with either passive or minimally active a revenue source. The most difficult ones to justify are the ones that are going to save us money. And certainly when I look at something that's going to save us money, I want the company to take risk on that. And also I'm looking for at least an ROI 3 to 4 times. So in conclusion, that's the quick way I look at a digital health solution, and happy to entertain any questions that may come up on the chat, but that is what I wanted to say this afternoon.
It's a really great analysis, and obviously all the good work that Downstate's doing, you guys are in the thick of it. You're a safety net hospital. You're seeing you're the cornerstone hospital for Brooklyn, and so these decisions are really important. Every single decision you make is going to either alleviate strain or put strain on one of your units, one of your departments, one of your divisions, and so you have to take every single one of these things very seriously and make sure that the evaluations are bulletproof as you're doing them.
Yeah,
and again, we've got a few minutes left. Would love to know more about the digital health technologies that you're seeing that seem to be most promising, either ones that you've recently implemented or ones that you are looking to implement. If there's a category, whether it's more along the lines of an app or a digital therapeutic or a healthcare delivery service like a Recovery Plus, what types of digital health solutions are you seeing coming in and really making a difference and improving and optimizing your revenues and things like that?
So first I wanted to just give a plug to Breakthrough One and thank you, Stan, for bringing companies to us that potentially can help us either operationally or financially. So things I'm looking at right now, and like I mentioned, I really like Recovery Plus because it's really passive revenue coming to our physicians. So that's one thing, but we are looking at revenue cycle solutions. The other thing, we are doing a study to look at what our nurses are actually doing and how much of that is nurse work, and trying to identify solutions that may enhance what our nurses are able to do during the day and alleviate their work. We're very interested in looking at the EHR, how we can improve the EHR experience, how we can use AI and natural language processing to help our physicians more easily document what they need to do. And then the other thing that we're very interested in is dealing with social determinants of health. So how do you collect the data on social determinants of health? And then more importantly, how do you connect patients to community-based organizations that can help with the social determinants of health issues that our patients are dealing with? So those are some of the main things that we're currently looking at.
That makes a ton of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And that wraps up our time. I know it's 1 o'clock. You have a hard stop at 1. Thank you again for joining us today, Dr. Berger. I really appreciate it. And a huge round of applause from the audience around the world watching this and learning more about what safety net hospitals in America are really trying to manage today. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Stan.
Incredible presentation, and just shows you the depth of analysis that Dr. Berger has put together to help guide the decision making within his hospital staff around digital solutions to ensure that when there's a solution coming in, it has to have a real impact and it has to solve those 6 issues. It has to have good answers for those 6 major points that he brought together, including things like implementation, integration, line of sight to revenue, et cetera. And so that's it's just really appreciated. And speaking of revenue, one of our favorite new funds these days is the Democracy Fund, and it's a group of people, again, from Silicon Valley who've put together an incredible assortment of companies and are really doing some good work around this idea that in an age, and I think we can all agree on this program, where democracies are threatened around the world, we need to do a little bit more to protect them and to help really burgeon them up and do whatever we can do to help support them. And the leaders of Democracy Investments are Julie Kane, the CEO, and Rick Rikorsky, who is the chief economist. And they are both here today to talk a little bit about how digital health and health tech is playing a role in this. It's interesting to see how, when we think about what is the essence of a strong democracy, it has to have a very strong healthcare system. We know this from the history of democracies, circa going back to the U.S. and then even as recent as 1947 when India came to be, and we saw and certainly India declared independence. It was around long before 47. We saw that healthcare and the public health system in India was critical for that democracy to become what it is today, which is the world's largest free market economy, and we're just the world's largest democracy. And so, Julie, tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing and all the good work that you're putting together.
Great to see you again, Stan. Thanks for having us. This is such a great topic because, interestingly, many analysts believe that social media is one of the main reasons for the decline in the health of democracy around the world. Our strategy is to leverage the Economist Democracy Index to very neutrally and systematically reweight an international portfolio to promote democracies and to we tilt away from authoritarians to encourage authoritarians to become more democratic, to get more capital as our fund grows larger. Now, I'm going to share my screen and share some data from The Economist. They have been tracking country democracy scores since 2006, and 2 of the 60 indicators that are incorporated in our strategy actually look at a country's freedom of electronic media. So this is the list of all of the 49 countries that do have free media. So they would get a high score in our strategy. These have electronic media controlled by the state, so they would not score so well. And then those that do not have free media at all, we get a very low score and are tilted down quite a bit. Now here we can see those that have restrictions on access, no restrictions on access to the internet. So these countries get a very high score in The Economist and therefore in our strategy as well. No surprises here. You can see those that have some restriction. These will get a middle score. And then here's who has complete political control of their scores. So you'll see in our strategy, we downweight the UAE by 62% and Turkey by Turkey also gets downweighted quite a bit. So I also have some data here from the Pew Research Center on looking ahead to the views of the digital spaces in the future. Interestingly, 60% are optimistic, while 40% are very pessimistic. So I'm going to start with the pessimistic views. These analysts worry that AI, which is driven by capitalism and geopolitical competition, will not be able to improve digital spaces in the future. So this view is that humans can't keep up with the change. The psychographic manipulation will continue. The disinformation that we saw during COVID, sadly, with the anti-vaxxers, that was quite disturbing. And while there needs to be more regulation and legislation, these views are not so optimistic. Now, the more optimistic views think that tech can be fixed and algorithms can be improved for future better spaces. And there can be expanded legislation and regulation, and the public can apply pressure to reform digital spaces, and we can shift away from the reliance on VCs and startups to create a more fair ecosystem. So I'm curious for thoughts. We've got a chat open. I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are here.
Yeah, it looks like someone would like to know both what you and Rick think about the recent inclinations of Congress to want to have more of a say on TikTok and what it's doing in the US.
Yes, it's well timed. And as a mother with two daughters who are very active on TikTok, I am glad to see the increased scrutiny there. Interestingly, it's the regulations the oversight is different in the US than it is in China. Rick, I don't know if you want to comment on.
Well, I think that part of the problem is social media is becoming a part of great power competition. And the methods that they use are very, very old. I think two people you have to talk about when you discuss how social media is weaponized. I think you need to understand Machiavelli and Che Guevara. Machiavelli basically says, if you're going to invade a country, you don't share language and culture, they're not going to greet you as a liberator. And I think Rumsfeld and Putin now know this. But that applies to more generic aspects of life. And Che Guevara taught that if you're an insurgent and you want to essentially overthrow a government, you need to find some inherent contradiction and latch onto that and exploit it, something that the government can never solve. And you're not going to solve it. You're just going to purge anyone who complains about it later, but because that's Che's way. But you have to find these contradictions. And our adversaries have taken advantage of this for decades. One of my favorite numbers is that during the Vietnam War, the Soviets put more money into the US anti-war movement than they funded the Viet Cong, right? I find that mind-blowing. So today you look at something like COVID, and they're exploiting divisions in culture, trying to tell people that vaccinations are bad. And one inherent contradiction we have as a country is that we pride ourselves on individual liberty, basically everyone doing whatever they want. And sometimes public health kind of needs everyone to buy into doing the same thing, right? That's what we saw during COVID. That's an inherent contradiction. And so we see this, and we see essentially social media being used to drive wedges between all these different populations and try to break us apart. And for better or for worse, the healthcare sector is 20% of our economy. So don't be surprised if 20% of the wedges are being driven into things which are public health related.
That's a fantastic way to look at this as well. So again, I think the idea here is as well, when we look at the importance of digital health, it is a platform where everyone has to do things that they may not want to have to do in order to help themselves. When you look at some of the health tech platforms that are out there, what are some of the things that you think offer the most promise when it comes to digital communications and digital media in healthcare?
Well, I think one actually that it's a little bit off of social media, but anything which detects fraud. Amazing stat, 20% of Medicare spending is fraudulent. And one of the biggest, if not biggest players in Medicare fraud is Russian organized crime, to the point that their revenue from that is on par with the Russian defense budget.
This is this is phenomenal. This is good to know. And certainly new learnings here too. And so when we are looking at at fraud, we're looking obviously in digital health at claims. We're looking at certainly during the opioid epidemic, during the opioid crisis, which we're still going through. Obviously, there's a lot of fraud there. around script writing and around being able to obtain these kinds of class 3 pharmaceuticals that are highly regulated. And what other areas are you seeing around the world where you're seeing these sorts of frauds being perpetrated?
I'm not too sure about that. Where else it happened? I'm sure it does. One of the interesting things is the parallel between how we code different medical services and how they did it in the Soviet Union. There was enormous medical fraud in the Soviet Union, and doctors were paid based on the specific service, and certain services they were uninterested in providing because it didn't pay very well. So organized crime in Russia refined these techniques, and basically just they're able to export it to any country with similar practices.
Interesting. And we saw this as well with medical technology during the smallpox campaign in the 1960s and 70s. We saw the Soviets, again, this is pre-end of Cold War, trying to import and spread smallpox vaccinations for free to Ethiopia, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, as a way of trying to eradicate smallpox and gain favor with these countries, most of them democracies in the 60s and 70s, as a way to curry favor with their leadership, as a way of trying to have these democracies flip into more communist favorable and certainly Soviet favorable regimes. And so along those lines, how does your fund help protect that kind of influence peddling? And you're seeing a tremendous amount of it now with a number of other authoritarian regimes around the world. How does your fund help address some of that?
By investing less money in those countries, they are less empowered to share their wealth. But yes, absolutely, it's important because healthcare has always been a critical part of diplomacy.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are entire books written about this, about the importance of medical technology in diplomacy. And there are a number of scholars that have written tremendous works in this area. In digital health, we should be all aware of this in this symposium today, that digital health is very much a part of these sorts of medical tenets, and it's an incredibly important part of it in a lot of ways, and it's incredibly diverse in geopolitical football in a lot of ways, since 80% of the U.S. digital healthcare system has software engineers based out of India, and so it's something where we have to understand that our digital health ecosystem in the United States is very much tied to the fortunes and the favors of the subcontinent. And so it's something to be aware of on a number of levels. And so when we take a look at your fund, how can we as a digital health community support democracy investments and the good work that you all are doing in trying to support democracies around the world through venture and investments?
Well, I would say, Julie, please.
No, go ahead.
I would say, first of all, just in general, when you do invest, think about the consequences of where your investment money goes. Obviously, if you're investing in international index funds, we would suggest our own. But more generally, just think about it. And when you invest in authoritarian countries, you're empowering them. So think twice about doing that.
And yeah, look under the hood of your international investments and see where you are invested. So many people don't know, if you're in a large international index fund, you could have Tencent and Alibaba in your top 15 holdings. Even the large international ESG funds have those two securities in their top 15. So especially with your index strategies, make sure you look under the hood and know what you're supporting with your dollars.
It's fantastic. And again, we are applauding you. You're seeing the virtual applause coming across with all the cartoon hands on your Zoom screen. And again, just phenomenal work. And again, I would just, I would really hope that everyone in the symposium today would reach out to both Julie and Rick and do whatever we can do to support these folks in any way we can. Connect them to your wealthy friends, your LPs, your limited partners that want to invest in funds and things like that, and spread the good word, because this is not only is what they're doing important individually, but if we can somehow harness this and have this ethic somehow or another extrapolated and somehow picked up by other major funds around the world, we are looking right now at a very serious threat to democracy, not just in the United States, but around the world. Only 36% of people right now on the globe live in a democracy, and it's shrinking every year. And so we have to be aware of that. And again, digital health is a big part of supporting those democracies, and we have to remember that as well. So we have a broader common goal here. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Rick, for joining us today.
Well said, Stan. Thank you.
So again, stay tuned for Julie and Rick. They will also be at the Hitlab Summit coming up in June at Columbia University. And we're going to be doing everything we can do to share their good work and their good progress. They are making tremendous progress. You can also see them in some of the videos that they have, some of the interviews they've done on Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg's YouTube channel, etc. Again, I would hope that you could share it with your friends, your family, anyone who's investing with those folks. Next up, we are really excited to have our Women's Health Tech. Don't forget to sign up for your Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. This coming Wednesday, we have an interview from our own Nina Joshi, the head of the UX team at Kaiser, working and interviewing Jamie Meyerson from Maven, a Columbia grad and a legacy at Columbia University. So it'll be a lot of fun. It's 12:30 to 1. They're very fast paced. They're very interesting. And it's always fun to hear Nina talking to folks about how to improve healthcare and how to improve healthcare for women specifically through better digital solutions. So we're winding out our third hour here today, and we've got 3 more segments to cover. And what better person to talk to about ChatGPT and about artificial intelligence than one of the leading data scientists in the ecosystem, and also someone who is a big part of the Columbia digital health ecosystem, having taken a few different courses from the Columbia Business School Executive Education Program, Eugenio Zuccarelli. Hi, Eugenio, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Stan. Great to be here.
It's great to see you. And if you could just start by giving the audience an idea of your background and what you do within CVS Health.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do my best, especially to talk about ChatGPT. But I basically do, as you were saying, digital health, AI in the healthcare ecosystem, and I've been doing it for a few years now. I'm currently a manager in data science at CVS Health, where we do literally that. We do big data. We use that a lot, and we especially do it to pretty much implement AI solutions in the healthcare spectrum. So we focus a lot on diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and a few other to try and improve the well-being of the people that are affected by these diseases. And we try to do so also relatively smart. We try to predict this, look ahead in the future, and see whether we can do this effectively. And I've been doing this for a few years before. I was at MIT doing research, and previously I've been working a lot with the NHS in the UK. So always able to draw some parallels from the European market, the European system, and the American one.
I love it. And I detect your accent is not a New York accent. Where are you from originally?
That's right. I'm originally from Italy. So I've been doing a lot of my studies back in Italy, then moved to the UK, and now happily in the US.
Excellent. And again, I've got family in Naples. Which part of Italy are you from?
I'm originally from Genova, so on the northwest coast. Family's been a bit all over the place there, mostly from the Liguria region, so mostly from Bear, from Cinque Terre, all that region, and now we're a bit over the world.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be from. Wonderful. Almost as beautiful as New York. So it's great to it's great to talk about this. Everybody is talking about generative language programs like BERT, certainly. We had one of the leading data scientists from Anthem on last month's Symposium talking about BERT and showing actually some Python language and things like this. Obviously, it's this month, it's super hot as well. Everyone is seeing now a lot of applications for certainly data science and certainly these large language databases that are taking the world by storm and covering a lot. And we're seeing, some fairly substantial doom and gloom as well. People are talking about how we need to start regulating AI. It could potentially get too powerful. What's your thought around this? And talk a little bit to the audience and explain a little bit about big data and how you guys are using that, and then and is it something that is it open for like a generative language program like ChatGPT?
Yeah, definitely. And as you were saying, big data is pretty much the key word. It's difficult usually to define big data. There is no clear definition. There is no specific size or amount. It's usually defined just as data that is complex. It's complex to manage. Usually, I tend to think of it as just data that cannot stay in Excel. So that's something that is open to interpretation, but it's definitely something that we use. It's literally the fuel to everything we do, especially in the AI spectrum. And it's also the fuel to things like ChatGPT, BERT, all of these algorithms. So it's extremely important, and especially in the digital health area, you can see how we have a lot of untapped potential with these raw resources in the databases, in the systems. And it's the classic issue with interoperability, right? Like you have this massive potential, but it's stuck in systems and databases. And now we're starting to see some algorithms like ChatGPT, BERT, and so on, have a lot of potential, in my opinion. But like with every technology, it's neither good nor bad in itself. It's depending on how we use it and how we apply it. But it's for sure something that for an industry like the healthcare one, we have to be very careful, because the potential with systems like ChatGPT is extremely high. These tools are extremely powerful, and for this reason, they might hold some secrets or have some capabilities or potentials that might be disruptive for an industry. So definitely pro-regulation. It's more about how can we strike the balance between innovating and pushing in this direction to do the right things, but at the same time regulating to make sure that we don't get into issues, especially in healthcare.
Yeah, that's a major, and it's a complex component too, because certainly at CVS Health, you're sitting in the middle of the reimbursement system, but you're also heavily regulated on a lot of things that you can and cannot say, and you cannot do. And you're probably, if not the largest holder of patient information and patient data, you're one of the top three, right?
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity. It's a massive ecosystem. It's literally, as you said, about how can you use it. We have data, we have potential. It's more about how can we pick the right battles, and especially in a way that is ethical, doesn't introduce bias, and so on. So that's, I would say, the key components. Like, let's say, my team and I, all of the people that work in many big healthcare companies or tech companies do have the skills. The technology, the AI technology is open source, but that doesn't mean that we have to just jump on it and just use it, because there are huge potential ethical implications and huge potential bias issues. I would say that's one of the key components and one of the key differentiators across companies is it's very easy to get into the challenge. It's much more difficult to think about all of the potential issues and make sure we can take a rational decision there.
Now, what's your take on this? Do you think, as some people are calling like Elon Musk, do you think that we should be regulating AI more in healthcare, or should we just let people do what they want to do?
It's a challenging one, because I would say overall, personally, I tend to think that over the past, maybe there would have been more potential in finding solutions to, like not open source data, but make it more available, anonymized, secure, private. But I think that there would have been a great opportunity to allow researchers, institutions to access data, especially data from a lot of different areas like lab results, genetic information, to come up with better research and better models that would have improved people's outcomes. And now with tools like ChatGPT, I'll be honest, they've also been impressive for me working in the industry. So I would say for sure it's good to regulate, especially for the healthcare industry. It's more a matter of what to do with that and in which areas.
That's very interesting. And you're looking at this as well, Eugenio. You're seeing it from the health plan perspective, which is so valuable for so many people who are watching this now around the world. What from your perspective is the biggest promise for data science and for AI, particularly some of these new generative language programs? for health plans? How do you think this, in 5 years from now, how do you think this is going to help health plans, and the data science behind it are going to help health plans in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I'm a bit more skeptical, also talking about innovation versus regulation. A bit more skeptical about the usage of these technologies on the clinical spectrum. Right? I would love for it to take a bit more time before we use ChatGPT to take decisions or diagnosis. I want to keep that in doctors' hands, but I think it's a massive potential in everything that's more operational in the life of a doctor. So much of the time of a doctor is spent in entering information in a database, in an IT system. We know how difficult it is to find the right ICD-10 code or the right CPT code, and they waste so much of their time. And so my hope is that ChatGPT or whatever other technology is going to be able to, let's say, have a doctor that just talks to the system, writes down a summary. Then you have a generative AI language system that takes that information and then picks automatically the right ICD-10 codes, takes the right decisions, schedules the appointments, and so on. So relieving the doctor from the burden of the management of the clinical components and focusing more on the actual patient, which is the most important thing.
It's brilliant. No, it's absolutely brilliant. That it's pretty clear that that's where a lot of investment's going. Obviously, health plans over the last 10 years with some pretty notable companies have spent a lot on artificial intelligence. What percent of those programs that you've worked on in artificial intelligence over the last 10 years have actually worked the way they were originally intended? Would you say it's been like 50%, 10%? How well are those programs working today?
It's difficult. I'd say probably 50% is a good estimate. It's also very important. That's exactly what you said. It's very important to think about AI systems very scalably and flexibly at the beginning, because they might change down the line. And so it's really important to know and think about all of the potential implications, different ways to use them, because it's never a 100% certain type of thing. It's usually just more about being flexible and try things out. So a lot about experiments and trial and error.
Yeah, talk about that too. When you've been working with big data, you obviously have seen a lot of challenges. And what kind of challenges have you seen, and what kind of advice would you give to executives in the audience who are watching this now and are looking for advice from someone as experienced as you are about how to use big data and what kind of challenges to avoid when they're doing that in their enterprise?
Yeah, there are quite a few challenges. I would say one of the biggest ones, of course, is privacy, and how can we ensure that the information is kept private, even at the level of big data. So that's one for sure, is how can we ensure that we both foster innovation, use that level of big data, but we also make the situation a bit more constrained, we ensure privacy, and we make sure that it's not going to be any data breach or data leakage. And in general, also, I would say, obviously, the interoperability issue is a huge one. There's no real solution. Maybe with generative AI technologies, there might be a solution to be able to query multiple different data sources, collect information in an easy way. I would say that's still one of the big challenges. And finally, how to manage this amount of data. It's a lot, it's difficult to process. And so investing in all of these resources might help down the line with all of the clinical components as well. So I'll say probably the bottom line is that, data is really the fuel of a lot. It's the fuel of a lot of decisions that we take. And so investing in those areas is not just about investing in IT rather than in clinical decision-making. It's actually putting down an investment for something that can pay off later in a lot of different ways.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So this is the kind of advice that the folks in our audience need to hear. So thank you, Eugenio, for joining us today, and hoping that you have a terrific spring weekend. We'll talk to you later. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you have that right there. It's just an amazing viewpoint from someone who's in the front lines in actually working with big data, data science, and AI on a day-to-day basis, and very busy doing it at the nation's largest health plan, CVS Health. Obviously, the integration between Aetna and CVS Pharmacy, now called CVS Health, has had a massive impact on the ecosystem. And we have 2 more sessions to go. We're really winding the day down here in terms of what's happening in digital health and revisiting the basics of digital health. And it's going to be a great conversation now that we're gonna have with someone who, again, as we continue to talk about AI and we're talking about chat, we're in the midst of a very substantial lift in the ecosystem around how and what people are doing with these different technologies. And we have, in a lot of ways, we have an assembly of options, and we're seeing tremendous healthcare changes occur across the ecosystem, and we've got to take that seriously. We're getting a lot of prognostications. So we're a group of scholars and professors from Oxford University that talked about AI causing the demise of the human race down in 2044. And so we're getting these very very dark estimates of how AI is going to affect our society. So we need to be aware of that. And we do have a number of questions in the question box that we can get to for a minute here. And we do want to talk about this. I think there was a good question around TikTok and whether social media is good or bad for democracy. I think the point that they were making was that social media is good for democracy. Social media controlled by authoritarian regimes could be bad, but no one really knows, right? The bottom line is that we know that that data sitting in servers in potentially hostile nations is cause for concern. We don't know exactly how it's being used or what's being used. We do know, for instance, in European nations, if you're familiar with a lot of the GDPR, the regulatory and data regulatory structures in the European Union, which is known for short as GDPR, any data of any French, German, other European citizens being collected has to be stored in that nation. So one very easy and very quick way of being able to understand that is that if you're running an electronic health record system for a hospital in Germany, then you have to have all those patients' data sitting in a server in the cloud. It could be, sure, but it has to be in Germany. So that's an important component of that, and that's important to look at. Another question from Rich is, Dr. Berger doing any partnerships with virtual first digital health clinical practices? Don't know that answer. Great question, Rich. And certainly we will have Dr. Berger at the Hitlab Summit at Columbia University on June 27, 28, 29. But again, that's a question we can follow up with him at that point. But very good question. And then we have another question around from Jack around students using ChatGPT and whether that is a good or bad thing. I think most teachers would say that any kind of artificial intelligence in the classroom is something that could be used as a supplement, certainly as a replacement. Not a great idea. We're trying to teach students how to think critically, how to write, how to do a variety of different math and STEM skills. So I think it really is a differentiator on what exactly are these AI tools doing and how are they helping students. So that is the student doing the work or any of the work, or is it being done completely by an automated program? And that's a bigger issue at that point. And so that's really where we can have these broader conversations and begin to understand where that works. And let's not forget that in the age of the electronic calculator, as it was coming to the forefront in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people talked about how calculators should be banned and they shouldn't be used. And now we see today calculators are critical for students to do advanced work in calculus, in some of the advanced geometry and certainly trigonometry courses. And so that's something that when calculating integers and some more complex formulas, it is fundamental to have calculators to use as well. So there's a debate that's taking place. It's healthy. It's needed. There's no direct answers necessarily yet. And as these And this happens all the time, right? Technology always speeds ahead of society, and society and certainly policymakers in Washington, D.C. have to catch up, and particularly in democracies, because we need to have a healthy debate about what the policies should be in a healthy democracy. So it's going to be very interesting. Let's not forget Napster. Napster was legal and free for about 3 years before the Supreme Court ruled that Napster wasn't legal and shouldn't be free. And then we got iTunes, and the rest is history there. And really excited to have Lynn Bowie on board as well. And she's going to be joining us and talking about, again, sticking on this topic of AI and talking about what is happening within the ecosystem around how AI is working, and what kind of perspectives that she's bringing to the ecosystem around her use of AI and this sort of artificial intelligence, and whether or not we can see improved patient engagement and better outcomes through these types of artificial intelligence technologies. And certainly that's not only are we trying to understand where they can make a difference, but also how they can make a difference as well. Hi, Lynn, how are you doing? It looks like you're coming in from another planet. Your video is a little broken there, but it's good. It is good to see you as you're joining us. Tell the audience a little bit about your background and what you're doing these days.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. I don't know what's going on with my video. Normally Zoom works just fine, but it's kind of fidgety today. I am Dr. Lynn Bowie. I'm a hematologist oncologist, and I have wear several different hats. I'm the clinician at my own clinic, Global Cancer Research Institute, where we see patients. And then I'm also president and CEO of Chloris Biosciences, which is a biotech company that's partnered with Bayer Pharmaceuticals, developing induced pluripotent stem cells as a treatment for cancer.
That's fantastic.
Glad to be here.
You sound like a very busy person, so we can, maybe your video camera is going on strike. Your video camera is not happy that you're so busy. But the idea that you are working on both of these different areas, and you're seeing digital health in both of these, both from the life science standpoint as well as the healthcare delivery standpoint. Talk to us about your experience with digital health technologies, and talk to us a little bit about one of the ones that we found more recently, MediKarma, that we're really impressed with, which is a kind of a supernova of chat GPT with an avatar and a persona that talks to people about their healthcare. But give us some perspective on what you're seeing there.
Yeah, no, I think digital health is one of the fastest growing segments, right? With products, in terms of diagnostics, therapeutics, interfacing with patients, interfacing with collecting data with insurance companies as well as clinicians, really bringing it all together, to, I think, change the way healthcare is going to be conducted in the future. I think we're still going to have, in-person visits, and of course we still need physicians, but having MediKarma, which is one of the newest sort of companies out there looking to engage patients and improve health outcomes with collecting data, but also getting the patient to interact with Jill, who's sort of the avatar that's available on MediKarma, to really guide them through their chronic illnesses. I think, cardiovascular disease is one of the largest sort of killers of people all over the world. It's the #1 killer. Second to that is cancer. And so in terms of having MediKarma be able to really engage patients, collect data, have them interact with their physicians, and then being able to really sort of monitor them at home through RPMs or remote patient monitoring devices that are currently available in digital. So the combination of all of that, I think, is going to change the way that patients can really take care of themselves and improve their health and their chronic conditions like hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity. And we're hoping that with MediKarma and patient engagement and sort of more personalization and access to their own data, they can actually really take hold of their own healthcare and improve their illnesses so that we can actually see outcomes that are measurable and quantifiable.
That's impressive. And so when you are looking at Medikarma and how you're seeing it operationalized, how is it actually improving people's health?
So, we're just starting to deploy it within my own clinic. My clinic is a little, I was very excited to actually promote and engage this to see if it can actually help my patients, because we have cancer patients and also patients with blood disorders in my clinic, and they're on chemotherapy, but they also have sort of all of the chronic illnesses that all of sort of most patients in the world have: hypertension, diabetes, hyperlipidemia. They may have atrial fibrillation. They may have all sorts of comorbidities on top, sort of at their baseline. And then, of course, unfortunately, they develop cancer. And so I'm giving them chemotherapy as well as other treatments. And so using Medikarma and the RPMs, engaging them and actually being able to monitor them at home, their blood pressure, their weights, their vital signs when they're not in the clinic, I think is going to really help us gather the data and also keep a closer eye on our patients, to make sure that they're doing well, and then, not forgetting while I'm treating sort of their blood or cancer disorders, I'm not forgetting sort of all the other diseases that, affect quality of life. So we're starting to deploy it. Patients are very excited. They're really interested in being able to really take control of their health. And then I think also with telemedicine that's come around because of COVID, it was sort of, thrust upon us and required of us to be able to do telemedicine with these patients. That's been helpful for patients also, because not everyone can travel, and come into the clinic if they're ill. And so being able to actually have Medikarma be part of their health journey so that they keep track of it, and then having the remote patient monitoring and having nurses and us being able to interact with them. Even when we don't see them, I can get their vital signs, their blood pressure, their pulse, see how they're doing without having them come into the clinic. So yeah, and we're very excited, and the patients are very excited to, sort of get started and see what happens.
It's fantastic. So in a lot of ways, for you and for your clinic, the way you plan on deploying this is really as a data collection platform, so that you can have more patient data collection more frequently, and have it as really, it's almost like a physician assistant in a lot of ways, helping you get that data in a way that's easier for them. They don't have to go to fill out a survey or anything. They can just talk to an actual avatar, right?
Yeah, and I think it's more than just the data collection. I think as the patients use Medikarma, they start to personalize it, right? So it's personal to that patient in terms of not just what their data points are also, but really what they're able to do. They can interact with Jill, and Jill can give them advice and guidance in terms of, what to eat, what not to eat, what to do with their medications, medication reminders, so they don't, so that they don't forget and continue to take their medications. There's risk sharing, there's, all kinds of, personalization and being able to, I think the most important thing is, in the past, when you go to a physician or you go to the hospital, you don't have any of your own data. I have so many patients, when I see them, they say, I ask them, what medications are you on? And they have no idea. It's the green pill and the red pill and the pink pill, but being able to actually share data and have the patients really take control of their health and being more aware and really, participating with the physician and the nurses as a team, right? Acting together to really, try to take the holistic approach to, taking care of your health and being really, I think, empowered, right? Being empowered and not just sort of a cog in the system or something.
Yeah, no, this is great, Lynn. Thank you so much. Again, we'll have you back on when your camera's working again, and sometime next month, or we'll have you in New York City at the Digital Health Summit on campus on June 27, 2029. But again, thank you for joining, and to take good care of yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Likewise, good to see you too. And again, for those of you who are interested in meeting more people like Lynn and hearing more about things like Medikarma, again, scan this tag in front of you with your cell phone, and learn more about the different areas that we're working in to create connectivity, connection, inspiration, and education around the ecosystem and the like. And speaking of ecosystem and ecosystem stakeholders, we are closing out now the March Symposium with one of the preeminent leaders in the ecosystem, someone you've all heard about, certainly read about, and you certainly know ZocDoc, which is one of the digital health darlings that are out there, and just an incredible journey that ZocDoc has been on. And again, yet another New York City startup. We love our New York startups. And again, just really glad to have you, Olivia. Thank you for joining us today. And if you could start off, Oliver, just talk a little bit about your background and your journey.
Thanks so much. Good to be on and happy to. I'm a physician by training, German by upbringing, as you can hear, and practiced as a physician for a few years, joined McKinsey & Company, did a lot of healthcare there. And 15 years ago, I started ZocDoc with the fundamental insight that it's very hard for a patient to get access to care, right? When you pick up the phone, you start dialing for doctors, it takes you an average nearly a month to see a doctor. And when we started out in 2007, everyone told us, yeah, of course, right? There's a doctor shortage. And whenever there's a shortage, queuing is the answer. But it turns out that doctors actually have a lot of hidden inventory. They have last-minute cancellations, no-shows, reschedules. And what we do is we surface that and make it really easy for the patient to get access. And it's a win-win. The patient gets seen very soon, typically within 24 to 72 hours, and the doctor doesn't lose their perishable inventory and can see patients when they plan to.
That's great. And so talk a little bit about ZocDoc and telehealth. I think everyone has an idea of what ZocDoc does, and now certainly love the fact that it's this new element, not new necessarily, but it's an element on the platform that maybe wasn't there 5 years ago. What was it that that brought ZocDoc to want to offer a telehealth element on the platform?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was actually quite a scary experience at the time. We, as you know, are a marketplace where patients come and they find care, and for the most part, they mean in-person care, right? So we had the thriving marketplace in 2020. We did some telehealth on the side just as an experiment, but it was not something that was top of mind for patients. In fact, we had millions of patients search every month. In February 2020, I could count the ones that were typing in telehealth on my fingers, and we actually tried to educate consumers that, hey, for the kind of problem that you are trying to get help for, telehealth might be a completely viable option. And so we were introducing them to this idea. But even with that, we had less than 1% of our bookings be telehealth. The pandemic fundamentally changed that. We offered telehealth starting April of 2020, and very quickly it was went from less than 1% to over 40% of our bookings. And so that was the initial catalyst to get patients interested in that, and a very large number of them tried this out across really a staggering set of specialties. We even had like dentistry appointments at the time.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and it's so convenient for your customers, right? Because your customers are already on your platform, making appointments, looking up physicians, finding who's the right doc, that sort of thing. And now they have an ability to instantaneously start the visit, or at least set up a visit, even if they don't want to go to the doctor itself. We just saw the data yesterday. ATA released, first quarter data on telehealth visits, and I think a surprise to a lot of people, way up, and no one really expected that. Everyone was seeing a downward kind of the tree swinging back to more normal last year, and now it's pretty clear that this kind of virtual first healthcare is not going away. It's actually starting to get some more steam. What are you guys seeing at ZocDoc?
Yeah, so I think it's a more differentiated picture, right? I think when you first get to know a doctor, you start sort of an episode of care. I do think in-person continues to be the dominant choice for patients. So, on ZocDoc, you can see doctors that only offer telehealth, doctors that offer only in-person, doctors that offer both in-person and telehealth. and those are presented side by side, without any discrimination. So it's an easy way to tease out the preference of the patient. And I would say there it's very clear to begin that engagement with the patient. The in-person option clearly wins out. We see actually twice the win rate in terms of who a patient chooses from doctors that are in person but offer telehealth as a downstream option, but versus someone who only offers telehealth to begin with. So patients clearly have that intuition that they want to be able to see a doctor, and the doctor will eventually have to look in their mouth and listen to their heart and poke their abdomen. But they value telehealth as an option, and so I think from our data that hasn't changed. There are clearly implications from, well, does every follow-up have to be in person, right? Do results have to be given in person? Things like that. I believe, though, that we see some shift from what used to be done over the phone that is now happening through a telehealth consultation. And so I would continue to have just tempered optimism on the long-term adoption of telehealth versus sort of the continued dominance of the in-person encounter.
That's true. Yeah, I think we're seeing the same data. That's amazing. And so one of the things that we see at the lab when we're doing different studies across different therapeutic areas is vastly different adoption in digital technologies. Just last night at the School of Public Health and the medical campus, Cole Manship, who's one of the leaders for Memorial Sloan Kettering in digital healthcare, he did his master's in public health at Columbia, class of 2012, talked about that, talked about how cancer care is still catching up with some other specialties, some other major diagnostic categories for digital health and digital health usage. How are you seeing that at ZocDoc? Are you seeing certain specialties adopt telehealth more rapidly than others? What's your experience been there?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In fact, it's sort of a tale of two cities. Mental health is one bucket where we continue to see very strong telehealth adoption. And in fact, telehealth is kind of crowding out all in-person care, and it is by far the preferred way to engage. And we see 95% plus of all mental health visits happening through telehealth. Then there's like a bucket of specialties where telehealth at least plays a role some of the time, like primary care, dentistry, things where we have like long-standing patient-doctor relationships where they sort of do a check-in through telehealth. And then the ones where telehealth is really very much subordinate in a rare occasion. Think dentistry and other like very, very physical specialties. So it follows a little bit the pattern that you would expect. But the really strong adoption on mental health is staggering. And what I've heard from some of our mental health providers is that it's actually very helpful for them, for the patient to be in their home where they can switch the camera around and show them how they live and open the fridge, and they see whether that patient that always used to have a tidy home suddenly lives in a mess and maybe is sort of steering towards a psychotic episode, or how the fridge is stocked and what other factors may influence patient's well-being. And then that's clearly a plus that was much harder to produce when they were seeing the patient in their practice.
It's fantastic. What a great story. So really improving not just the platform, but also the patient engagement and the ongoing relationship between ZocDoc and the customer base. And that's a big theme for today in terms of revisiting the basics of digital health. It looks like one of the basics is that the more engagement, the better. And not a lot of platforms are getting good patient engagement today. It looks like yours is one of the few success stories that we can point to and say it's actually working well with ZocDoc and how they're being able to reach their customers. Any advice? You're seeing a lot of digital therapeutics. You're seeing some other digital health companies not doing so well. We won't name names. You guys are doing well. What would you give as advice to folks out there in terms of how to survive in these tough times as a digital health company that's scaling rapidly?
Yeah, I think I don't know if you know, I'm in the position to give advice. It's always better to be lucky than good. Is, I guess, my number one advice. But then the other bit is that I think as a class of entrepreneurs, right? Like we tend to overestimate the speed at which change happens, right? And then from time to time, you know, we sort of extrapolate too much too soon, and we believe that, you know, self-driving cars are going to revolutionize everything. We think that mental health is going to exterminate, that artificial intelligence is going to exterminate doctors. And we think that all of these things will happen sort of in the near term. When you build a business around things that sort of require a lot of changes, you know, very quickly, particularly from business customers, I think that's a difficult proposition. Yeah, we've always been focused on having a very measurable ROI for our customers. You know, every doctor knows precisely what they're getting from ZocDoc, and they can follow that ROI. We've made things that are that have no upfront cost, right, and where we shoulder all the risk to take out the adoption hurdles, because that's ultimately what kills startups in healthcare, is to make it difficult and an act of religious faith to adopt your new product. You want to take that out as much as possible, and that's certainly been, in my opinion, a big part of our success.
That's fantastic. Fantastic story, and just wonderful to have you on the program again. Looking forward to seeing you also at the Digital Health Summit, Columbia Digital Health Week in Columbia University. And again, much appreciate your time today, and looking forward to talking more and learning more from you in the future. Thank you very much, Oliver.
Thank you. Looking forward to that as well.
Just an incredible story. Great story all around. And want to take a few minutes to close out here today. As you've seen now, as we're revisiting the basics of digital health, and a very poignant talk from Dr. Berger. Again, a wonderful interview from Bill Toronto. Tremendous presentation from Sana, from Gaspard, from Rubatection about what is going on in the digital health ecosystem. And what we're seeing is this new emerging component with a lot of hope and a lot of noise and chatter about how AI can actually help folks out, whether it's coming through an avatar like MediKarma, or whether it's coming in through a regular language generative program like ChatGPT. And so we're seeing numerous ways where people are trying to fuse in these models. More importantly, in the ecosystem, it's important that we understand that as a matter of fact, we are going to be talking a lot more about this in April. April 27th, don't forget, is your next opportunity to participate in the monthly symposia that we're holding at Hitlab virtually for free. Everyone can join. If you have any ideas, don't forget to link in to me or to email us with your ideas for speakers and topics. We're going to be covering major topics, again, including artificial intelligence, digital therapeutic approvals from people like David Ree from Microsoft, and again, Zina Manji from Hitlab, and Bill Toronto from the Merck Global Fund, and David Lee from Carta De Luca. So tremendous topics to be covered next month, and looking forward to seeing you all again on the program. Don't forget to sign up to attend the Digital Health Innovators Summit for free virtually, for a little bit of funding, a little bit of a charge to come there in person and be a part of the campus community on Digital Health Week, June 27th through 29. And looking forward to that. Thank you again to the tremendous efforts from Information Mediary. And don't forget to join our webinar series, Best Practices with Applied Technologies in Clinical Trials. So register for that. It's a 3-part webinar series coming up later on this month, or later on in April. And you can also join us for our every Wednesday of almost every week of the year, about 50 weeks of the year, Women's Health Tech Wednesdays with Nina Joshi from Kaiser Permanente. We'd love to have you join us there. Again, very much an amazing audience, lots of participation. We're the only virtual program that offers a wide open chat box, so you can chat away and network virtually with lots of people on LinkedIn. We love doing that. It's a nice way to, again, make sure that it's not just about education, it's about inspiration, and it's about connection. And then don't forget, all these different programs that we have taking place, scan that one. And then, of course, we have our sponsors to thank, from the Merck Global Fund to FFF to Astellas to AARP and Colgate, One True Health, IMC, and Goodwin. We want to thank them all for their contributions to Hitlab and allowing us to continue our good work. Don't forget to also send a LinkedIn and a note of thanks to our tremendous production staff here at the lab. These sessions take an enormous amount of time and energy to put together so that you can learn a little bit more about the digital health ecosystem every month, and of course on YouTube. Thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful spring week. We'll talk to you in April. Cheers, everybody. Stay safe.